we just got the start of MCU's Phase 6 with the long-awaited The Fantastic Four First Steps, which Phase 6 is going to be the culmination of everything from the Multiverse Saga that the MCU has had. Obviously, the Multiverse Saga has not been the most popular in a lot of ways. People have been frustrated, but honestly, the multiverse properties have probably been the most successful. You look at Deadpool and Wolverine, Loki, Spider-Man No Way Home, these are the properties that people love the most. And because of the new multiverse that we got with the MCU, this world is massive. And with the end of Phase 5 in the MCU, I think it's time to give a full run-through of the entire MCU watch order, including every project in the multiverse. So, here we go. For starters, we're gonna go with what the MCU started with, the Infinity Saga. The series which focuses in on the Infinity Stones and the culmination of the battle of the entire MCU against Thanos. So, for this, we will start with Captain America, the first Avenger, taking place in 1942. So Steve Rogers, a determined but physically weak man, becomes the super soldier Captain America to serve in World War II. He faces off against Johann Schmidt, also known as the Red Skull, the ruthless leader of Hydra, who wields the Tesseract to create advanced weapons. The film introduces foundational elements of the MCU, including the super soldier serum, the Tesseract, which will later be revealed as one of the 6 Infinity Stones, the Space Stone, and the origins of Hydra. It ends with Captain America being frozen in ice, setting up his return in the present-day MCU and his role in forming the Avengers. Moving on from there, we have one-shot Agent Carter. So Peggy Carter, still mourning Steve Rogers a year later, defies orders and takes on a mission herself, proving her capabilities as an elite agent. She battles remnants of Hydra, and this short serves as a bridge between the first Avenger and Agent Carter the series, showing Peggy's transition into post-war espionage and setting up her future founding role in S.H.I.E.L.D., where we then go into Agent Carter, taking place from 1946 to 1947, where Peggy Carter navigates America as she tackles espionage threats, including the shadowy organization Leviathan, while working for the SSR. Her main antagonist is Whitney Frost, a brilliant actress turned scientist corrupted by zero matter. And the show explores the early development of S.H.I.E.L.D., the aftermath of World War II, and the legacy of Howard Stark's tech, all of which influence modern MCU espionage. Now, moving on from there, about 50 years later, we have Captain Marvel, taking place in 1995, where Carol Danvers, an Air Force pilot turned Kree warrior, regains her lost memories and discovers her human identity, fighting against the Kree commander Yon-Rogg and the AI Supreme Intelligence. This film reveals the origins of the Avengers Initiative, introduces the Skrulls and the Kree Skrull War, and establishes the Tesseract's journey, tying into Endgame and Secret Invasion. Now, for the Kree Skrull War, there's one property that goes into this very heavily, which is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but with the way that the latter seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. work, and the fact that it's not shown as part of the MCU timeline on Disney+, I actually don't have it in this world. I actually believe that it is in its own timeline, which is MCU adjacent, and honestly, I would not be surprised if this Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show that we had in the past actually tells us all the things that are the same in the future timeline for the MCU once Phase 6 is over and they kind of redo the timeline after Secret Wars. I wouldn't be surprised if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is sort of like that soft reboot. That, like, we know all the little items that did happen in the background, but everything else of the story is different. That's a very easy way to make it work. So I'm actually going to hold off on having Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this world because of that. But moving on from there, we have 15 years later, Iron Man in 2010, where Tony Stark, son of Howard Stark, a billionaire weapons manufacturer, is kidnapped and creates a suit of armor to escape, later becoming Iron Man and facing his corrupt mentor, Obadiah Stane. This film really kicks off the MCU, introducing Stark Industries, S.H.I.E.L.D., and the idea of a shared superhero universe, with Nick Fury's post-credit scene appearance hinting at the Avengers. We first met Nick Fury at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger, saw him again in Captain Marvel, and here he is again, Iron Man. We will later find out more about who kidnapped Iron Man, which will be known as the Ten Rings Organization, which will play a huge role down the line. And moving on from this, right after that movie we have Iron Man 2, where Tony Stark battles declining health from his arc reactor and faces Ivan Vanko, who seeks revenge for his father by using Stark's technology against him. This introduces Black Widow, teases Thor's arrival, and further develops Nick Fury's interest in Stark as a potential Avenger, setting up the Avengers. And around that same time, where we have Nick Fury's big week, we have the Incredible Hulk in 2010. Bruce Banner, on the run from the military, seeks a cure for his Hulk condition while clashing with Emil Blonsky, who becomes the monstrous abomination. It establishes Bruce Banner's backstory and connection to General Ross. Tony Stark's cameo at the end ties Hulk into the Avengers Initiative, and the serum in and of itself is a play on the super soldier serum given to Steve Rogers for World War II. And right after that, we have one shot, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer in 2011, which is obviously a prequel to Thor, where Agent Phil Coulson stops at a gas station and casually foils an armed robbery while en route to New Mexico. It shows Coulson's competence and connects directly to the events of Thor, reinforcing S.H.I.E.L.D's growing presence. And after that, as mentioned before, we have Thor, where the arrogant Asgardian prince is banished to Earth by Odin and learns humility while his brother Loki attempts to seize the throne. It introduces Asgard, Loki, and the cosmic side of the MCU. It ends with Loki's fall, setting up his central villain role in the Avengers, where evidently Loki does not go down without a fight. He has a huge role in the MCU moving forward, and one that even expands to the multiverse as we know it. After that, we have One Shot the Consultant in 2011, where Agent Coulson and Sitwell manipulate a government meeting to prevent Abomination from being released by recommending Tony Stark as the consultant. It explains how S.H.I.E.L.D. kept Abomination out of the Avengers, retroactively tying the Incredible Hulk more tightly into MCU continuity, and it shows where the Abomination is held for so long, where we will eventually see his return down the line for it's a very long time before we see him again, but he will have a presence in the Multiverse Saga in Shang-Chi and She-Hulk. And speaking of characters that will eventually have a presence from the Incredible Hulk, very far down the line in Captain America Part 4, we will have the return of the leader in the MCU. And with all of those properties, we have the culmination up to the Avengers in 2012, where Nick Fury finally assembles Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye to stop Loki from unleashing the alien Chitauri on New York. This is the first major team-up film and reveals the actual power of the Tesseract, and introduces Thanos in the post-credit scene, shifting the MCU toward intergalactic threats. Now, we don't see Captain Marvel in this property because Nick Fury is saving him for a bigger mission down the line. And this is followed up by One Shot Item 47 in the same year, right after the Avengers, where a couple discovers Chitauri tech left behind after the Battle of New York and uses it for crime, prompting S.H.I.E.L.D. to intervene. It shows the post-Avengers world and leads directly into the formation of S.H.I.E.L.D's Special Response Team featured in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but as mentioned before, we're not going to include this show in this world for the time being because the timeline goes off the rift and with time travel, which kind of throws everything off. So we'll hold off there. We'll see what happens down the line. And next up, a year later, we have Thor: The Dark World, where Thor reunites with Jane Foster to stop the Dark Elf Malekith from plunging the universe into darkness using the Aether, which we later find to be the Reality Stone. It deepens the Infinity Stone mythology and shows Loki faking his death and taking the throne of Asgard in Odin's guise. And this is really the first time we find out about how important multiple Infinity Stones are in this world, where Thor goes to an intergalactic collector and gives him the Aether, saying it's unwise to keep two stones so close together. And the collector later says, 1 down, 5 to go. So that's how we know there's a lot more coming down the line. And followed by this, we have Iron Man 3 in 2013, where Tony Stark battles PTSD and faces Aldrich Killian, who uses extremist technology and hides behind the fake persona of the Mandarin. It reinforces the emotional fallout from the Avengers, showcases Stark's resourcefulness, and ends with him blowing up his suits, a major step in his character arc. And right after this, we have One Shot, All Hail the King, where Trevor Slattery, the fake Mandarin from Iron Man 3, is interviewed in prison before being abducted by someone claiming to work for the real Ten Rings. It sets up Shang-Chi in the Legend of the Ten Rings by confirming the existence of the real Mandarin and the Ten Rings organization. After this, we have Captain America the Winter Soldier, where Steve Rogers uncovers a deep conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D. and faces off against his brainwashed best friend, Bucky Barnes, now the deadly Winter Soldier. It shatters S.H.I.E.L.D. as Hydra is revealed to have infiltrated it, and reshapes the power structure of the MCU going forward. After, we have Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014, which is the debut of James Gunn in this world. I love James Gunn as a director, love him in the MCU, love him in the DCEU, and he just dropped Superman. I enjoyed it. It's very comic booky, but if you're into that, you guys are going to enjoy it. So highly recommend you watch it. And this movie takes place in 2014, where Peter Quill forms a team of misfits to stop Ronan the Accuser, who seeks to use the Power Stone to destroy planets, once again bringing another Infinity Stone into the landscape of this world. As it expands the MCU to space, introduces the Power Stone as mentioned before, and lays the groundwork for Thanos' quest for the Infinity Stones. After this is I Am Groot, where after Guardians of the Galaxy, where Groot was destroyed and Rocket had to replant him, Groot starts growing and becomes a baby, and it kind of shows his beginning where he's still in the planter, and then he comes out and he becomes Baby Groot. So Baby Groot embarks on a series of short adventures following his regrowth after Guardians, and it offers a charming insight into Groot's early regrowth and personality, serving as light-hearted filler between major events. And speaking of those major events, right after that we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Many people don't know this, but they are back-to-back movies, where Peter Quill meets his celestial father Ego, who plans to reshape the universe in his image, forcing the Guardians to stop him. And this is the first time we meet a Celestial in the world of the MCU, which will play a larger role down the line in the Eternals. And this further develops the team's bonds, explores Quill's heritage, and sets up Mantis and the Ravagers for future MCU involvement. And next up, we have what else but Daredevil Season 1. What a great show. I had actually never seen it until a few months back, where I was binging it for Daredevil Born Again. Not sure why, I just never got around to seeing it. But after having seen it, especially Season 3, I love this show. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend Daredevil Born Again. A little bit of a drop-off, but the way that it ended, I feel like Daredevil Born Again Season 2 or Daredevil Season 5, whatever you want to call it, is going to be incredible. So, in this show, Season 1, blind lawyer Matt Murdock uses his enhanced senses to fight crime as Daredevil, going up against crime lord Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin. It grounds the MCU in gritty street-level heroics. Fisk and Daredevil will later appear in the main MCU in shows like Hawkeye and Echo, and even in Spider-Man No Way Home. After that, we continue with the Defender Saga, or I guess the Netflix Saga, whatever you're going to call it. But we have Jessica Jones Season 1, taking place in 2015. Jessica Jones, a private investigator with super strength, confronts Kilgrave, a manipulative villain who once controlled her mind and abused her. It expands the street-level perspective of the MCU and introduces themes of trauma and power abuse, and helps build towards the eventual The Defenders. After is Avengers Age of Ultron in 2015, where Tony Stark and Bruce Banner accidentally create Ultron, an AI meant to protect the world, who turns against humanity and tries to cause global extinction. It introduces Vision, Wanda Maximoff, and the Mind Stone lays the foundation for Sokovia Accords, Civil War, and Infinity War. A lot of people look down on this movie, but I think it plays a huge role down the line, as mentioned there, and is arguably the most important MCU movie up until this point. And moving on from there, we have Ant-Man in 2015, where Scott Lang, a well-meaning thief, is recruited by Hank Pym to wear the Ant-Man suit and stop Darren Cross, otherwise known as Yellow Jacket, from weaponizing shrinking tech. It introduces quantum tech and the quantum realm, which becomes crucial in Endgame. It establishes Lang as a key future Avenger, and even though Darren Cross's Yellow Jacket does disappear into the quantum realm, he is not gone. We will see him again. Not in a form many people were happy with, though. So with that, we'll move on to Daredevil Season 2, where Matt Murdock deals with rising chaos in Hell's Kitchen, including vigilante Frank Castle the Punisher, the mystic ninja clan known as the Hand, and his former love, Elektra. And by exploring the deeper lore of the Hand, it really starts to set up everything that is going to go on in the Defenders. Moving on from there, we have Luke Cage Season 1. Luke Cage, a man with unbreakable skin, becomes a Harlem hero while battling local crime bosses Cottonmouth and Mariah Dillard. It builds out the Defenders world with Harlem politics and social justice themes, and connects with Jessica Jones and Daredevil's arcs, since Luke Cage did play a pretty decent role in Jessica Jones. And back on the side of the Hand, we have Iron Fist Season 1, where Danny Rand returns to New York in 2016 to reclaim his family's company and fulfill his destiny as the mystical Iron Fist, fighting against the Hand. It further explores the Hand, and this show feeds directly into the Defenders in 2016, where Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist unite to stop the Hand from destroying New York City. It's the culmination of the Netflix Marvel series and brings the street-level heroes together and deepens their bonds, especially around Daredevil's sacrifice. And I would say, while Avengers Age of Ultron is the end of Phase 2, the end of the street-level Phase 1 is the Defenders. And moving on from there, a very important project in this world, for many reasons, Captain America's Civil War in 2016, where the Avengers split when Steve Rogers defends Bucky Barnes from global arrest, while Tony Stark supports the Sokovia Accords and government oversight. It fractures the Avengers and introduces key players in the MCU, including Black Panther and none other than Spider-Man, a character that will have a huge role in the multiverse down the line. It'll set up major character shifts leading into Infinity War and Black Widow. And in Black Widow in 2016, Natasha Romanoff goes on the run after that movie and confronts her past, including her sister Yelena and the villainous Red Room led by Dreykov. It explores Nat's backstory and sets up Yelena Belova as her successor down the line. And the post-credit scene, I say you should definitely watch after the Infinity Saga. Should wait until you get to Hawkeye to watch that, because it is a spoiler for what happens down the line. But I will say Black Widow is a movie that definitely came out too late. I think this would have been a much better movie had it come out around this time, right after Civil War. Watching it after the Infinity Saga, where we already know what her fate is, it kind of just takes away the value of this movie. But another character that's introduced in this movie, very important, is the Red Guardian, who we will later see in Thunderbolts with Yelena. But another character in Thunderbolts is Taskmaster that is in this Black Widow movie. I'm not a fan of the way they did Taskmaster. That is one character that definitely needs to be rebooted after Secret Wars. And moving on from there, we have Black Panther in 2016, where T'Challa returns to Wakanda to become king, but faces a challenge from Eric Killmonger, a ruthless warrior with a personal vendetta who we find out to be T'Challa's cousin. It expands the MCU's geopolitical scope with Wakanda. T'Challa's decision to share Wakanda's resources influences global events, leading into Infinity War. And T'Challa is just such a great character, and I really want to see more of the Black Panther world down the line. Once again, sadly, with the loss of Chadwick Boseman, they had to switch up their plan for this franchise. And I do hope that after Secret Wars, they can sort of reboot the character so that we can see T'Challa once again in the MCU. But after that, we have Spider-Man Homecoming, where Peter Parker tries to balance high school and superhero life while facing Adrian Toomes, otherwise known as the Vulture, who is trafficking alien tech that we saw for the first time all the way back in Avengers with the Chitauri technology. Very similar to what happened in Item 47, where it's just Chitauri technology, it's being stolen and repurposed, and the Vulture pretty much embodies that entire persona. So this builds on Civil War, showing Peter's development under Tony Stark's mentorship and further integrating him into the Avengers orbit, where the film culminates with him getting a new suit from Tony Stark, but he denies it and says he wants to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Something that we actually never get to see because this character for some reason never wants to fight in New York. He always wants to go to Europe or Washington or to space. So I really hope the next Spider-Man franchise with Spider-Man Brand New Day has him be more grounded. Really hoping for that. But speaking about New York, we have The Punisher Season 1 taking place in 2016, where Frank Castle uncovers a conspiracy linked to his family's murder, leading to a violent campaign against corrupt government forces and criminals. It spins off of Daredevil Season 2, exploring trauma, PTSD, and vigilante justice in the post-Civil War world. I also did forget to mention that at the end of Defenders, Daredevil does sacrifice himself for the rest of New York to survive. So, hey, just a little thing I missed, but we can move on from there. And we move on with Doctor Strange, also taking place in 2016, where an arrogant neurosurgeon, Stephen Strange, learns the mystic arts and must defend Earth from Caecilius, who seeks to summon the dark entity Dormammu. It introduces magic and the multiverse, as well as the Time Stone, which becomes essential to the events of Infinity War and Endgame. At this point, we have seen 5 out of the 6 Infinity Stones. We've seen the Space Stone, the Mind Stone, the Time Stone, the Power Stone, and the Reality Stone. The only one we're missing is the Soul Stone, but that'll come down the line. And Doctor Strange, because of his role in the multiverse and with the Mystic Arcs, plays a huge role down the line. And we will eventually get to that, but for now, we go back to Defender Saga with Jessica Jones Season 2, where Jessica investigates her past and discovers that her presumed dead mother is alive and a super-powered killer. It continues her personal journey of identity and trauma and is loosely tied to MCU events, but stays self-contained. After is Luke Cage Season 2, also in 2017, where Luke becomes Harlan's protector, but struggles with his rising fame and faces a powerful new enemy, Bushmaster. It builds tension between Luke and the criminal world of Harlem, continuing the themes of power and responsibility from earlier shows. Followed by this is Iron Fist Season 2, where Danny Rand works to protect New York's Chinatown while dealing with the return of Davos, who seeks to take the Iron Fist for himself. It focuses on passing on the Iron Fist legacy and reshaping Danny's role. Alright, and with that, we go on to Daredevil Season 3. As I mentioned before, Daredevil died, or did he? Matt Murdock returns from presumed death and faces off against Wilson Fisk again, who manipulates a new foe, Bullseye, to destroy Daredevil. It wraps up many arcs from earlier series and solidifies Kingpin's place in the MCU street-level villain roster, setting up future appearances. And I absolutely love this season. I mentioned it before. Bullseye is a great new antagonist for this world. Kingpin is always great in this world. The team of Matt, Karen, and Foggy, absolutely love them. And I can't get enough of them. And we will continue to see them down the line. But for now, we can continue into The Punisher Season 2, where Frank Castle protects a teenager from a cult and must confront Billy Russo, his old friend turned enemy, who becomes Jigsaw. Continues Castle's story of vengeance and redemption, and is still street level but loosely exists in the MCU's timeline post-Civil War. And in The Punisher show, both Season 1 and Season 2, you have some overlapping arcs with Daredevil, where Karen Page does come in the show and plays a pretty decent role. After this, we have Jessica Jones Season 3, where Jessica hunts a twisted serial killer while debating whether she should continue as a hero or hang up her mantle. It serves as a conclusion to Jessica's story, and to the Netflix Marvel era, which I would say is really the end of phase 2 of the Defenders saga, where phase 3 is when Disney eventually takes over the Netflix saga with Disney Plus, but we'll get into that later. And this takes us into Thor Ragnarok in 2018, where Thor must escape the planet Sakaar and stop his sister Hela from triggering Ragnarok, the destruction of Asgard. We see Asgard be destroyed in this movie as the only solution to destroy Hela, and it sets up Thor's character transformation, directly leading into the opening of Infinity War. But very importantly in this movie, we do have Thor and Loki working together once again. Now, Hela's a huge antagonist and plays a great role in this movie, but her being the goddess of death, I think would fit very well with Thanos' role in the past. I would have loved to have seen some sort of animated spin-off show which shows that Hela and Thanos knew each other in the past, maybe shows the war of Asgard against Odin that Hela was trying to rise up with, and I could honestly have seen Thanos being Hela's executioner in that war. But we never got that. But honestly, I would still love to show this. When I make that video down the line of the next phase of the MCU, I will be including this prequel series which will show the War of Asgard, with Thanos being Hela's executioner and them sort of being star-crossed lovers. And right at the end of Thor Ragnarok, we have their ship be caught by the ship of Thanos, which leads directly into Avengers Infinity War in 2018, where the Avengers and Guardians unite to stop Thanos, who seeks all 6 Infinity Stones to wipe out half of all life in the universe. Despite their efforts, Thanos succeeds and snaps his fingers, causing mass extinction. A major turning point for the MCU, bringing together all major heroes and culminating years of buildup around the Infinity Stones and Thanos. And the first movie that I can really say shocked me in this world. Seeing all the heroes die, that was insane. And honestly, still to this day, Avengers Infinity War is my favorite MCU movie, and I would argue is probably my favorite superhero movie, just with the way that it concludes, the comedy of it, the action, the drama, everything. I think it is a perfect MCU movie. I have no notes. Absolutely love this. And the only reason Avengers Endgame performed so well is because of how good this movie was, in my opinion. And I'll get into some of my problems with Endgame pretty soon, but once again, I love Avengers Infinity War. But before we go to Avengers Endgame, we have to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, this was a very random movie for them to release, but it does show Scott Lang teaming up with Hope Van Dyne, the Wasp, and Hank Pym to rescue Janet Van Dyne from the quantum realm while evading the facing villain, the Ghost. It introduces key quantum realm tech used in Endgame, and its post-credit scene directly connects to Infinity War, showing the effects of the snap, where we see Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, and Hope all get snapped by Thanos, leaving Scott trapped in the quantum realm. And in this, we see Avengers Endgame, which starts in 2018, where the surviving Avengers find Thanos on a distant planet after uniting with Captain Marvel. Together, they realize that he destroyed the Infinity Stones and the Gauntlet, and what he did can never be reversed. This is a huge problem, obviously, because now half of the galaxy is gone forever. So what happens? Thor goes for the head. He kills Thanos, and the story's over. Or so we think. Until 5 years later, where after Thanos has snapped, the surviving Avengers devise a time heist to collect the Infinity Stones from the past and reverse the damage. This is done through Ant-Man's return to the MCU from the quantum realm 5 years later, even though only mere moments pass for him. So Tony Stark sacrifices himself to defeat Thanos, and Steve Rogers retires, passing the Captain America mantle to Sam Wilson, and it closes the Infinity Saga, resolves arcs for Iron Man and Captain America, and resets the MCU status quo, opening the door for the multiverse and new heroes. And while we're seeing them go back in time to collect the different Infinity Stones to stop Thanos, as mentioned before, we do have some characters die, but very important things happen. One of which is Black Widow dying, which sets up Yelena Belova to eventually become the Black Widow down the line, and we'll see that story take place in the future. But we also have Loki, where we see the Avengers kind of screw up with getting one of the stones, and Loki actually gets the Tesseract and escapes during the events of the Avengers, something that never was supposed to happen. So when he escapes, where does he end up? In the middle of the desert, in a story we will see in his own show. But before we do that, I just want to close out and finish talking about Phase 3 with Avengers Endgame. This film really is the culmination of everything from the Infinity Saga. And that final battle where we see all the Avengers come together, not just the Avengers, everybody come together from the MCU. It is so impactful to see them all fighting in this war. Now, obviously, we don't have Daredevil, we don't have Yelena, we don't have every character. Nonetheless, it gave us everything that we wanted to see in an Avengers movie and was the perfect culmination of the Infinity Saga. Now, I think it had some problems, which are problems that led into what we're seeing in the Multiverse Saga. 4 of these problems being 1, the joke that they made the Hulk into, 2, the joke that they made Thor into, 3, forced social justice scenes like all the women just uniting in that final scene, where if you're going to do it right. Give us shows like WandaVision that actually treat the characters with justice instead of just having a one-off scene saying, oh, she has us to help her. And then Captain Marvel just fights the army by herself either way. It was a throw-off scene and had no reason of being there. And I think a lot of people hate that scene because it makes no sense. And the 4th being, with the characters that they killed in the MCU, it leaves a major power gap of people that need to fill those roles and fill those holes. Of people that need to fill those roles in the MCU. And with them kind of ruining Thor and Hulk in this movie, who is going to fill those roles? They have Spider-Man, they have Doctor Strange, but I think this is a big reason as to why the Multiverse Saga has not performed very well. Partially because Black Panther was supposed to be one of those leading faces, and sadly with the passing of Chadwick Boseman, that wasn't feasible. They had to do a complete 180 on who was going to run this next phase. And with that, we close out the Infinity Saga and start up the notorious Multiverse Saga. But it starts with one of the most popular projects in this era, Loki. And as mentioned before, Loki is the result of the events of Avengers Endgame, where they travel back in time and Loki gets a hold of the Tesseract, escapes, and somehow ends up in the TVA, the Time Variance Authority headquarters, outside of time itself, where after escaping, Loki's arrested by them and discovers that the timeline is being controlled by a mysterious figure. Alongside a variant of himself named Sylvie, Loki confronts the TVA's secrets and ultimately meets He Who Remains, the creator of the sacred timeline, who we will later find out has a much larger role to play, or I guess at least he did, but not anymore. But this season introduces the multiverse concept and the idea of timeline branching, which directly sets up events in Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania by unleashing Kang's variants. But before that, we do have to go into Loki Season 2, where Loki suffers from time slipping as the multiverse begins to fracture and must work with Mobius, Sylvie, and the TVA allies to stabilize reality and stop Kang variant Victor Timely from enabling the collapse of all timelines. Ultimately, Loki sacrifices himself by taking control of the multiverse's branching timelines, becoming the new godlike guardian of time, otherwise known as the God of Stories. It repositions Loki as a central figure in the Multiverse Saga, setting up the structure of the branching multiverse and deepening the threat of Kang's variants heading into Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, which, like I mentioned before, is never going to happen. Instead, this movie has been replaced by what we'll see in Phase 6 with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. But before I continue on from this, we have to discuss something that many people don't actually know as part of the MCU, and it is Today in Marvel History, the YouTube short series, which just goes over a ton of different stories from the comics and gives them an animation of sort of the origin of these comic storylines. It was done a long time ago on YouTube. However, very recently, they decided to remake it as stories being told by the TVA's own Miss Minutes, which definitely have the vibe of Miss Minutes and the TVA from Loki. So it makes a lot of sense to just have as stories in this world. And with the events of Loki, where they end with the multiverse being pushed on the world instead of being looked down upon, these are stories that would make sense for Miss Minutes to just tell right after that, to really get us in the feel that now the multiverse is real. And this starts with Today in Marvel History, Doctor Doom debuts. It just shows the origin of Doctor Doom as he takes on the Fantastic Four. And that takes place in 1962. After we have Today in Marvel History, Daredevil and Spider-Man team up in 1964. This is our first real introduction to seeing Spider-Man in a larger role than just in the MCU. We saw Doctor Doom and Fantastic Four in their debut before, and now we get to see these characters team up. A team up that we will soon see take place in the MCU. Then we have Today in Marvel History, the wedding of Reed Richards and Sue Storm in 1965, which shows us a ton of Marvel characters that come together for this wedding, and a relationship between Reed Richards and Sue Storm, which will be explored in multiple future projects. After his Today in Marvel History, Johnny Blaze debuts as Ghost Rider in 1972. Now, we would have had a Johnny Blaze in the MCU with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but since we're holding off on that, not going to include that. And honestly, up until this point, since we haven't gotten any reference to Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider in the MCU, there actually isn't an actual Ghost Rider apart from Today in Marvel History one in the MCU. So, yeah, it's kind of disappointing, but we move on from there with Today in Marvel History, the death of Gwen Stacy in 1973, which is a huge story that we will eventually see in the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. And then we have Today in Marvel History, the Young Avengers debut in 2005, which definitely shows us what the future of the MCU will be, probably in phases 7 through 9. And they start to tease it with Ms. Marvel that we would later introduce in this franchise. But for now, it just shows us some of these characters, and all of these Today in Marvel History stories really prepare us for the future of the MCU. And now that we've seen the branching timelines and the beginning of the multiverse, we really start to explore this with the TV series What If. And What If goes into a ton of different worlds in the multiverse. Now, honestly, I think they could have done a little bit better. Some of the projects I'm happy with, some of them I'm not, but that's for another day to tell, because I would love to make a video on what my idea for Season 4 would be, and I will do that after we get Fantastic Four First Steps. But for now, we start with What If Hela found the 10 rings, which takes place 1500 years ago. And as mentioned before, new timelines form because of the events of Loki. And in this project, we see that Hela, stripped of her powers and banished to Earth, similar to what happened to Thor in the first Thor movie, comes across a new source of power, the 10 rings. And this really goes into what we'll eventually see in the events of Shang-Chi, where we get to meet Wan Wu and the real Mandarin. But we also get to meet Uatu the Watcher, who is watching over all these different timelines, telling their stories. And this is followed by What If Agatha went to Hollywood in the 1930s, where in 1930s Hollywood, a rising starlet manipulates a wealthy industrialist to fund her film, secretly planning a world-altering ritual. An unlikely hero emerges from Bollywood to thwart her mystical scheme and save reality as we know it. And this is the first time that we meet multiple characters. We meet Agatha Harkness, we meet Kingo, who's one of the Eternals, and we meet a ton of the Celestials in this movie. Not to mention, we also get to see the return of Howard Stark and Jarvis from Agent Carter so long ago. And speaking on those characters, this is followed up by What If Captain Carter Were the First Avenger, taking place in 1942, which obviously Agent Carter, Captain Carter. So when Steve Rogers is seriously injured, Peggy Carter becomes the world's first super soldier, and this really follows in line in a lot of ways with what happened in Captain America the First Avenger, just having Peggy Carter be that main character instead. And the way that it ends really sets up the future of the What If storyline, with Peggy Carter playing an intimate role in this world. And now we can go into probably the biggest world outside of the main MCU timeline, which is the Fox X-Men universe, otherwise known as Earth 10005. And I've actually done a video on this already in the past, so let's just drop that right here. While the first film to come out was X-Men in the year 2000, this watch order starts with the prequel film X-Men First Class. Set in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, this film shows the origins of the X-Men. Charles Xavier, Professor X, and Eric Leshner, Magneto, start as friends working together to stop Sebastian Shaw, a mutant who aims to trigger a nuclear war. The movie ends with the rift between Charles and Eric, leading to the formation of the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants. The mutants in this film include Mystique, Havoc, Beast, Banshee, Angel, Darwin, and more. In this movie, when Charles and Eric are recruiting new mutants to join their team, they do come across Logan, otherwise known as the eventual Wolverine, with his titular movie up next, X-Men Origins Wolverine. This film explores Wolverine's backstory, starting in 1845 when his mutant powers first manifest. It follows his life through various wars and his relationship with his brother Victor Creed, otherwise known as Sabretooth. We'll also meet Wade Wilson, the eventual Deadpool. The story culminates in 1981, where Logan is manipulated into the Weapon X program, resulting in the infusion of adamantium into his bones as he truly becomes the Wolverine, with his iconic claws. We're reintroduced to him with 2000's X-Men, where at this point, mutants are publicly known and society is divided on how to deal with them. Professor X leads the X-Men to protect humanity and mutants alike, while Magneto pursues more aggressive methods. The X-Men must stop Magneto from turning the world's leaders into mutants. The mutants in this film include Mystique, Jean Grey, Toad, Rogue, Sabretooth, Cyclops, Storm, and more. Now, 3 years later is the sequel to the film X2 X-Men United. So it follows the events of the first film. The X-Men face a new threat from Colonel William Stryker, who seeks to destroy all mutants. The X-Men are forced to team up with Magneto to stop Stryker and save the mutant race. The mutants in this film include Nightcrawler, Iceman, Pyro, Deathstrike, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Jubilee, Beast, Jean Grey, Rogue, Cyclops, and Storm. It deepens the conflict between mutants and humans, expands on Wolverine's backstory with the introduction of Stryker, and sets up the Phoenix storyline, which comes to fruition in X-Men The Last Stand, taking place 3 years later in 2006. Here, the discovery of a cure for mutation causes tensions between humans and mutants to rise. Meanwhile, Jean Grey is resurrected as the Dark Phoenix, leading to catastrophic consequences. The X-Men must confront both the threat of the cure and Jean's immense power. This film concludes the original X-Men trilogy, resolving the Phoenix storyline and bringing significant changes to key characters. We also see the deaths of some major characters like Cyclops and Professor X, but we later find out that he did not die in this movie, and his presence will be felt coming up very soon. Now, the mutants in this film included Iceman, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Rogue, Wolverine, Cyclops, Beast, Storm, and some others. This film is directly followed by The Wolverine. Here, Logan is struggling with the loss of Jean Grey, another character that died in that movie, and his own mortality. He is drawn to Japan, where he faces new enemies and must confront his own vulnerabilities and mortality. It sets the stage for the eventual events of Days of Future Past by showing Wolverine at a point of emotional and physical exhaustion. Before this film, though, we have the only show in the Fox X-Men franchise with The Gifted. Set in a world where mutants are persecuted, The Gifted follows the Strucker family as they discover their children are mutants. They join an underground network of mutants fighting for survival against a government agency. The mutants in this show include Blink, Polaris, Thunderbird, Ahab, Shatter, Sage, Dreamer, Eclipse, and the Strucker children. This sets the stage for a world where the mutants are being hunted with the film X-Men Days of Future Past. Taking place in 2023 in a dystopian future where I guess at this point it's not really the future since that was last year, but this is a dystopian version of that year where Sentinels hunt mutants and humans. Wolverine is sent back to 1973 to prevent the assassination of Bolivar Trask, the creator of the Sentinels, by Mystique. Now he's sent back by a group of mutants which is led by Professor X, who, as I mentioned before, did not die in Last Stand. The mission is ultimately successful, and through this timeline change, everything after 1973 before this film is erased and a new timeline is born. That means the projects The Gifted, The Wolverine, Last Stand, X2, X-Men, and all events in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which happened after 1973, are now erased. The only events in this world to remain are the events of X-Men First Class and X-Men Origins Wolverine events before 1973. So with this, the new timeline continues in the year 1983 with X-Men Apocalypse. The film follows the awakening of the first mutant, Apocalypse. He recruits powerful mutants, including a young Storm, Angel, Psylocke, and Magneto, to cleanse the Earth as his 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. The X-Men, led by young Professor X, must stop him. The mutants in this film include Jubilee, Blob, Caliban, Havoc, Beast, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, Nightcrawler, Mystique, and Wolverine. And let me just say, Quicksilver in this movie and in the previous movie, Days of Future Past, such a great character that it's such a shame what ended up happening with him in WandaVision. Really wish that we could have gotten that version of Quicksilver in the MCU. But who knows, maybe eventually. But 9 years later, we see the return of the X-Men in X-Men Dark Phoenix, where we start to see how similar this new timeline is to the old one, with the presence of Jean Grey once again becoming the Dark Phoenix, just a couple of years earlier in 1992. The film follows the X-Men as they face their most formidable enemy yet, one of their own, Jean Grey. After a mission in space, Jean is hit by a mysterious cosmic force that amplifies her powers, turning her into the Dark Phoenix. The X-Men must save both Jean and the world from her immense power. It concludes the main storyline of the X-Men in this new timeline, and in a way, it concludes the quadrilogy of X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and now Dark Phoenix. And for some time, this film was actually considered the last film in this universe. And we'll get into what the other last films in this universe were later, but for now, we move on to Fantastic Four in the year 2015, otherwise known as Fantastic. Now, this film was never actually established as part of the main Fox X-Men universe, but 2 things lead me to believe it is connected. First, Deadpool 2 actually originally included the Thing from Fantastic, who would have had a brawl with Juggernaut in the film, but he was later removed from its final cut. Why was he removed? Well, it might have been that Fantastic was a horrible movie. Or maybe he just didn't fit into the story. But I'm going to say that it was just because it wasn't a good movie. Honestly, that was probably the most disappointing movie I've seen in theaters outside of Madam Web. But Madam Web wasn't really that disappointing. I don't think anybody thought that would be good. But enough with my rant about Fantastic. So, second off, with all of the cameos and Easter eggs in Deadpool and Wolverine, they easily could have had the Fantastic Four from Fantastic show up, or at least one character, but they chose not to. Personally, I think it would have been pretty funny if they had shown Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch right after having shown us Chris Evans as the Human Torch. It could have been Deadpool just recognizing
wait a second, you're also from the MCU? I thought you had died there. And then he also turns into the Human Torch, and then Deadpool just starts having a running joke where he assumes everybody's going to be the Human Torch. So I think that could have been pretty funny, but they chose not to. They chose to not have any of them show up. Maybe because the world they were from hadn't been pruned yet to send them to the void. Maybe that's because their world was the same world as Deadpool's, as was originally planned, with the Thing showing up in Deadpool 2. With that though, this reboot of the Fantastic Four franchise follows 4 young outsiders who gain superpowers after a teleportation experiment goes wrong. They must use their powers to prevent the destruction of Earth by a former friend turned enemy, Doctor Doom. And not Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom, but whatever that version of Doctor Doom was. A year later, we have Deadpool in 2016. A spin-off from the X-Men films, Deadpool follows the story of Wade Wilson, a former Special Forces operative who, after being subjected to an experiment that leaves him with accelerated healing powers, trying to cure his cancer, he becomes the wisecracking anti-hero Deadpool. The film is set in the X-Men universe and features appearances by X-Men characters like Colossus, who later becomes Deadpool's best friend. 2 years later, we have its sequel, Deadpool 2, in 2018. Here, Deadpool assembles a team of mutants, including the X-Force, to protect a young boy named Russell from Cable, a time-traveling cyborg. And this is the second time where time is gonna start not making a lot of sense in this world. First, we had X-Men Days of Future Past, which completely changed the timeline. And get ready for Deadpool 2, because it changes things again. So, this film delves into themes of family and redemption and expands more on the X-Men universe by introducing more mutants, including the new timeline's Juggernaut, who sadly did not return in Deadpool and Wolverine because the character design in this movie was amazing. We also get a tease of Professor X's School of Mutants and see some of the characters from the franchise come together in this Easter egg. By the end of the film, we also get to see the return of the evil Deadpool from X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the return of Logan himself in this same scene. 8 years later, set in 2026, we have New Mutants, which was a film that had a lot of delays because it was about to come out at the time that Disney had bought Fox, and eventually Disney released it, and it, for a very long time, was thought to have been the last film in this world. But we know that's not true. So this film follows a group of young mutants held in a secret facility against their will. They must face their fears and discover the truth about their powers while trying to escape. While it is a standalone horror thriller, New Mutants is set in the Fox X-Men universe and introduces a new generation of mutants to this world. At this point, mutants are almost entirely gone from the world, and we continue to see this in the film Logan in 2029, so 3 years after New Mutants. It follows an aging Wolverine as he cares for an ailing Professor X on his deathbed. Logan reluctantly helps a young mutant, Laura, otherwise known as X-23, escape from a sinister organization. The film ends with Logan's death, marking the end of his journey and serving as the final chapter in his story, as what we will soon find out means the death of Earth 10005's anchor being. And it also served at the end of the X-Men universe. Or so we thought.
And after this, we can go into Earth 67, specifically for Spider-Man from 1967, the animated series which follows the adventures of Peter Parker, a high school student who gains spider-like abilities after being bitten by a radioactive spider. We all know the story, and this is a pretty classic version of it, where he fights crime as a superhero, often battling Marvel characters like Doc Ock, Electro, the Green Goblin, and the Vulture. The show features Peter juggling his superhero life with the challenges of being a teenager, including school, his job as a photographer for the Daily Bugle, and his relationship with his Aunt May. And this movie won't play a role again in the MCU until we eventually get to the Spider-Verse franchise, which we will get to later. But moving on from there, another property that's in the MCU is from Earth 58470, Howard the Duck, taking place in 1986. Where in this film, Howard the Duck is suddenly beamed from Duck World a planet of intelligent ducks with arms and legs, to Earth, where he lands in Cleveland. There, he saves rocker Beverly from thugs and forms a friendship with her. She introduces him to Phil, who works at a lab with scientist Dr. Jennings. When the doctor attempts to return Howard to his world, Jennings instead transfers an evil spirit into his own body. Now, this is a film that many Marvel fans definitely try to not talk about, and honestly, it wasn't a part of the MCU until I came up with this theory saying that Howard the Duck is actually connected to one of the worlds in What If. So, that world, let's go right into it and continue the world of Howard the Duck with What If Thor Were an Only Child, where Thor, who never learned to be a good hero, throws an out-of-control intergalactic party on Earth. He faces a ton of characters from the history of the MCU, and in the background of this party, two star-crossed lovers meet. Those being Darcy Lewis and who else but Howard the Duck. And honestly, the way that this happens makes me feel like this Howard the Duck is the same Howard the Duck from the movie. I talk a lot more about it in my video, so I recommend you all watch it. But in this episode, what happens is, what if Howard the Duck got hitched? A duck-human couple's unexpected offspring becomes the center of a cosmic power struggle. As various MCU entities seek the child's prophesied abilities, the new parents face challenges, starting with a suspicious vacation offer. And their child, otherwise known as Birdie, is evidently one of the most powerful characters in the history of Marvel just through this. I'm not sure if she's an Omega level mutant or what it is or how that power even works, but she does play a larger role towards the end of the What If franchise, but we won't be seeing her for a while. And this is followed up by another story in What If with Earth TRN 19881. What if Peter Quill's attacked Earth's mightiest heroes, taking place in 1988. So when Ego and a young Peter Quill attack Earth in 1988, Howard Stark and Peggy Carter form a team known as the Avengers. And another story taking place around that time on Earth TRN 19911 is What if the Red Guardian stopped the Winter Soldier, taking place during winter 1991. It takes place during the events of Winter Soldier trying to kill Tony Stark's parents, where two Soviet agents, the Red Guardian and the Winter Soldier, botch a 1991 mission to eliminate the Starks. Facing consequences, they flee their handlers and S.H.I.E.L.D., becoming unlikely allies in a dangerous game of survival and evasion. And this story does end with the Red Guardian eventually becoming an Avenger down the line in the future. And this takes us directly into another one of the largest worlds apart from the MCU and the Fox X-Men universe. Another X-Men universe, but it goes into more than just that. And it is known as Earth 751263. And it starts with X-Men the Animated Series Seasons 1 through 3, taking place through 1992 to 1994. Led by Professor X, the X-Men featuring Cyclops, Wolverine, Storm, Jean Grey, Beast, and others protect a world that fears them while facing Magneto, the Sentinels, and political threats like anti-mutant legislation. It establishes an interconnected animated universe and introduces recurring characters and elements like the Phoenix Saga and crossovers with Spider-Man the Animated Series, setting up future events in the 1990s Marvel animated continuity, like Iron Man the Animated Series Season 1 in 1994. So Tony Stark battles the villainous Mandarin and his team of supervillains known as the Lethal Legion, while concealing his double life as Iron Man. He's supported by a team of armored allies, including War Machine and Scarlet Witch, and it introduces Iron Man's animated origin and tech-based heroics, loosely sharing continuity with the Fantastic Four and setting up later crossover appearances, including his team-ups with Spider-Man and Hulk. And by showing the Mandarin once again, it shows the presence that he'll eventually have in the main MCU, and it continues showing us the Fantastic Four in the multiverse, which leads directly into Fantastic Four the Animated Series Season 1 in 1994, where Mr. Fantastic, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, and The Thing fight villains like Doctor Doom, Mole Man, and Galactus while trying to function as a public superhero team. It establishes this team in this universe with crossovers into Iron Man and shared villains like Doom and the Skrulls. The early episodes are known for a more comedic tone before a shift in Season 2. But before that, we have Spider-Man the Animated Series Season 1 in 1994, where Peter Parker juggles college life and photography while battling villains like the Kingpin, Shocker, and the Lizard as the heroic Spider-Man. It forms the foundation of the animated Spider-Verse, introducing key elements like the Daily Bugle, Mary Jane, and Oscorp. This season connects Spider-Man to the broader Marvel animated world through subtle nods and eventual cameos, but we cannot continue this world without going into X-Men Season 4 in 1995, where the X-Men deal with escalating threats including the return of Omega Red, the Morlocks, and the growing rift between Xavier and Magneto's ideologies. It continues building long-form arcs like the Phoenix Saga and anti-mutant politics, while strengthening character backstories and crossovers, particularly with Spider-Man. But we continue with Iron Man the Animated Series Season 2 in 95, where Tony Stark reforms his team after betrayal, battling new enemies like MODOK and Fin Fang Foom, with upgraded armor and deeper personal stakes. It tones down the campiness of Season 1 and brings in more serialized storytelling, aligning more with the tone of other Marvel's 90s series and including cameos from other heroes. Next, we have Fantastic Four Season 2 in 95. With better animation and stronger writing, the Fantastic Four face off against Annihilus, Super Skrull, and the more threatening Doctor Doom. It improves on Season 1's tone and visual quality, building deeper continuity with Iron Man and the larger Marvel animated canon, while expanding cosmic Marvel storytelling. Next is Spider-Man Season 2 in 95, where Peter continues navigating personal losses and scientific dangers while facing villains like the Hobgoblin and the Insidious Six, a multiversal version of the Sinister Six, which further develops Peter's universe and begins incorporating more serialized plots, laying the groundwork for multiversal elements and crossovers with X-Men and Iron Man. Speaking on the X-Men, we have Season 5 in 96, the final season, which sees the X-Men confront powerful foes like Apocalypse and Magneto while dealing with changes in leadership and Professor X's fate. It serves as a narrative climax for many characters, including the Magneto conflict with Xavier, and the series finale leads directly into the revival in X-Men 97 that we will get to very soon. But after is Spider-Man the Animated Series Season 3, where Peter faces his greatest emotional challenge yet with the rise of the symbiote, leading to the birth of Venom and Carnage. It sets the stage for Secret Wars and crossovers with other Marvel characters in later seasons. And by this sort of having a Secret Wars setup, it kind of establishes that the eventual Phase 6 Secret Wars we're going to get is not the first time something like this has happened, but it's probably going to be the one at the largest scale that's happened. But only time will really tell exactly what Doctor Doom's plan is and what the MCU's plan is for Secret Wars and Battleworld. But we continue this with the Incredible Hulk, the animated series, Season 1 in 96, where Bruce Banner seeks a cure for his condition, while General Ross and the Leader pursue him. She-Hulk joins as his cousin and ally, and we will eventually see a version of the She-Hulk in the main MCU. But this is the start of this franchise in this world, and has cameos from Iron Man and other heroes, and deepens Hulk's character while exploring classic comic arcs. Followed by this is what other than X-Men 97, obviously taking place in 1997. And it follows Xavier's departure. The X-Men must deal with Magneto inheriting leadership of the team and facing new threats like Bastion and the anti-mutant Operation Zero Tolerance. This series recently came out, I believe it was last year, and they're going to continue making this show, so this is one that through Phase 6 we'll continue seeing. And has a direct connection of X-Men the Animated Series, being a revival that expands the political and emotional stakes of the mutant world while pushing the characters into darker, serialized storytelling that feeds into potential multiversal implications. But after this, we have Incredible Hulk Season 2 in 97, where Hulk battles darker villains, while She-Hulk takes more of a leading role. The series also delves into Bruce's fractured psyche and integrates the Hulk into the larger universe with appearances by Ghost Rider and continued tech and military subplots. And I guess now that I'm reading this, I forgot to mention The Today in Marvel History segment on Ghost Rider that we saw before is actually not the only one in the MCU. We also have this one, my bad on that. But yes, we do have 2 Ghost Riders in the MCU as of now, and potentially Nicolas Cage and the version from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. coming in down the line. But after this, we have Silver Surfer, the animated series in '98, where Norrin Radd becomes the Silver Surfer to save his world from Galactus, and then travels the universe grappling with cosmic threats like Thanos and Ego the Living Planet. It's standalone in tone and aesthetic, but part of the broader animated cosmic lore, adding depth to Marvel space mythology hinted at in Fantastic Four. And it starts to show us the Silver Surfer in the world of the MCU, which we will eventually see in multiple Fantastic Four movies. But after that, we have Spider-Man the Animated Series taking place in '98, where Spider-Man is thrown into a multiversal crisis and leads various alternate versions of himself to stop Spider-Carnage in a reality-hopping finale. It concludes the series with a full multiverse storyline, decades ahead of its time, ties together all major Marvel animated arcs, and sets up Spider-Man Unlimited in 1999, where Peter follows a symbiote-infected ship to Counter-Earth and fights a new world's ruling bestials led by the High Evolutionary with a very different suit than what we've seen him wear before. It's the spiritual successor to Spider-Man the Animated Series, but set on an alternate world known as Counter-Earth. We will eventually see Counter-Earth in the main MCU as well with the High Evolutionary. But the biggest thing about Spider-Man Unlimited is this new suit that we see, which I'm a huge fan of. We will eventually see it again in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, setting this franchise as part of the main MCU. And after this, in 2024, we do have the Avengers United They Stand, where a new lineup of Avengers including Ant-Man, Wasp, Vision, and Hawkeye face off against Ultron, Kang, and other classic threats while working as a government-sanctioned team. Though short-lived, it introduced several Avengers characters to the animated continuity and leaned heavily into team dynamics, but it's mostly disconnected from the other 90s series in tone and world building. It's just taking place 30 years down the line, sort of a dystopian future with these Avengers characters. Alright, and now is the segment of the video where we have all of the 2000s live action superhero franchises, all taking place in different universes, but it starts with Blade, where Blade takes place in 1998, where Blade, a half-human, half-vampire daywalker, hunts down the vampire Deacon Frost, who seeks to awaken the blood god La Magra and enslave humanity. Launched the modern Marvel movie era with a darker R-rated tone and established Blade as a cult anti-hero. While not part of the main MCU, it laid the groundwork for a mature superhero film and inspired future adaptations of street-level Marvel characters, eventually us getting a chance to see this Blade once again. But we'll talk about that later. But for now, Blade 2 in 2002, where Blade forms an uneasy alliance with a vampire strike team to combat the Reapers, a mutated vampire strain created by the twisted geneticist Nomak. It's directed by Guillermo del Toro, and this sequel expands the vampire mythology and introduces hybrid monsters, raising the stakes of Blade's world. It deepens Blade's conflict with the vampire community and enhances the lore surrounding its origins, which is followed up by Blade Trinity, taking place in 2004, where Blade joins forces with the Night Stalkers, Hannibal King, and Abigail Whistler to stop Dracula, the original vampire, from leading a global vampire domination plan. It concludes the trilogy with setting up the idea of a wider vampire hunting team. Though critically mixed, it hints at a legacy beyond Blade himself and closes his arc before Marvel's eventual plans to reboot the character within the MCU, which I must say their plans to bring him into the MCU have absolutely flopped. We kind of already heard him, we haven't seen him. We were supposed to get a Blade movie a while back, we haven't gotten it yet. Now Mahershala Ali, who knows what's happening there. I made a video on what I think should be the path they take with Blade, and I would love for this to be the take that they do here, but only time will tell. If you want them to do this Blade story, considering how much they've struggled to come up with an idea, just forward this video over to them so that they can watch it, and at that point it's on them. And this Blade franchise takes place on Earth 26320. And followed by this is Earth 96283's Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man franchise. Starting with Spider-Man in 2002, where after being bitten by a genetically altered spider, Peter Parker gains superpowers and learns the value of responsibility after facing off against the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. It kickstarted the modern superhero blockbuster era, balancing real-world emotion and comic book action, and stands as the origin of Tobey's Spider-Man, laying the foundation for the trilogy's focus on sacrifice, identity, and power. And followed by this is Spider-Man 2 in 2004, where Peter struggles to balance his personal life and superhero duty while confronting Doc Ock, a brilliant scientist turned villain, after a fusion experiment goes wrong. It's widely regarded as one of the best superhero films ever, and deepens Peter's emotional arc and his moral code, continuing themes of responsibility and sacrifice, escalating his internal and external conflicts, especially with his relationship with Mary Jane Watson, which I must say, I cannot stand Mary Jane in this franchise, but we'll continue with Spider-Man 3 in 2007. Whereas Peter faces new enemies, Sandman, the new Goblin, otherwise known as Harry Osborn, and the alien symbiote that creates Venom, his own ego and darkness threaten to destroy his relationships and values. It closes the trilogy with Peter confronting forgiveness, guilt, and inner darkness. Though crowded, it completes key arcs like Harry Osborn and Uncle Ben's legacy, and sets the stage for Tobey's eventual return in Spider-Man No Way Home via the multiverse, but we'll get to that down the line. And I grew up on this trilogy. I absolutely love this franchise. Even Spider-Man 3, people hate on it, but for me, it's the most iconic of the movies. And this world is followed by Earth 701306, Daredevil and Elektra universe, where Daredevil, taking place in 2003, shows blind lawyer Matt Murdock fighting crime as Daredevil using heightened senses to battle Kingpin and the deadly assassin Bullseye, while falling in love with Elektra Natchios. It's an early attempt at a darker Marvel film where Daredevil introduced street-level vigilante justice and moral ambiguity. And it's directly followed by Elektra in 2005, where resurrected after the events of Daredevil, Elektra becomes a contract killer but turns against her handlers to protect a young girl targeted by the mystical group known as the Hand. It serves as a spin-off and spiritual sequel to Daredevil, expanding the ninja lore that would later reappear in the MCU's Netflix saga with the Defenders. While not directly continued, its themes influence future portrayals of Elektra in Marvel media, and once again, very similar to what we saw in the main MCU with the Defender saga. And I think this kind of proves to us that the Hand is not the ideal franchise to push in the MCU, because for some reason they can't get it right. And directly after that, we have Earth 121698's Fantastic Four universe, the OG Fantastic Four. What starts with Fantastic Four in 2005, where after a space mission exposes them to cosmic radiation, Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm develop superpowers and must stop their former friend Victor Von Doom, who seeks revenge after his own mutation. It introduces Marvel's first family with a light comedic tone and focuses on family dynamics, and though it's separate from the X-Men or Spider-Man films, it helped popularize ensemble superhero stories pre-Avengers, and is followed by Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, a character we recently saw in the animated series universe, and this takes place in 2007, where the Four face cosmic threats when the Silver Surfer arrives to prepare Earth for Galactus, a world-devouring entity, while Doom returns seeking the Surfer's power. It expands the cosmic side of the Fantastic Four universe and introduces key Marvel elements like the Silver Surfer and Galactus, ending this version of the franchise, and we will see the return of one of the members of the Four in Deadpool and Wolverine in the future. Actually, 3 out of the 4 of these 2000s franchises reappear in Deadpool and Wolverine, while the other one reappears in Spider-Man No Way Home. This is then followed up by another What If story with What If Killmonger rescued Tony Stark, taking place in Earth TRN 20081 in the year 2008, where Killmonger rescues Tony Stark when his Humvee is attacked in Afghanistan and manipulates his influence for his designs of conquering Wakanda. And this character will play a much larger role down the line in the What If franchise, But after this, we have Earth 26496, The Spectacular Spider-Man, also taking place in 2008. The animated series focuses on a teenage Peter Parker balancing his life as a high school student with his superhero duties as Spider-Man, all while trying to keep his identity a secret. The show explores his early days as Spider-Man, his relationships with friends like Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn, and his battles against various villains including Vulture, Electro, Green Goblin, and Venom. The series highlights Peter's struggles with responsibility, his personal relationships, and his growth as a hero. And this is another character that we will eventually see in the Spider-Verse franchise. But moving on from there, speaking on the Spider-Verse franchise, we have Earth 1610. And I might get a lot of heat for this with what I'm about to say. But I believe the Spider-Verse franchise is actually the same universe as the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs universe. Now, please, hear me out. You have to hear me out. In Into the Spider-Verse, when the multiversal machine is activated at Alchemax's lab, we actually see a very familiar device go into this machine from this Spider-Man universe. This being the Fluttersmurfer from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, which, in my opinion, considering Phil Lord and Chris Miller wrote and produced both franchises, and both are run by Sony Animation, I genuinely believe they are part of the same universe. And because of that, we can start with Earth 1610 with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the series, taking place in the early 2000s, where a young Flint Lockwood, still in school, invents quirky gadgets while navigating his life in Swallow Falls with his friends Sam, Brent, and Steve. And it serves as a comedic prequel to the 2009 film, showing Flint's early creative failures and relationships. While tonally lighter, it builds up to the world and characters that reappear in the films, specifically in 2009 with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, where Flint invents the Fluttersmurfer, a machine that turns water into food, but chaos ensues when the weather-based food storms grow out of control. He must shut it down before the world is buried in spaghetti, and establishes that Flint as a misunderstood inventor/hero, and introduces the Fluttersmurfer, the machine central to the franchise. This is followed by Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 in 2013, where after the events of the first film, Flint returns to Swallow Falls to find the Fluttersmurfer still active, now creating food-animal hybrids, otherwise known as foodimals, like tacodiles and shrimpanzees. It expands on the consequences of Flint's invention, while exploring themes of corporate greed and self-acceptance. The visual inventiveness of the foodimals also laid the groundwork for the creative animation used in Sony's later projects. Now, are all the Sony animation projects part of this universe? No. But could they all potentially exist in the multiverse? Yes. But because the only one that really has any legitimacy to this is Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, it's the only one I'm going to mention. But I would love to do a Sony animation theory video down the line, similar to what I did with the DreamWorks animation theory, the Disney animation theory, and the Illumination animation theory. So keep your eyes open for that. And for now, we're closing out the 1610 universe, and we will eventually get back to it. But for the time being, we are going to transfer over to Earth 8096 with What If the World Lost Its Mightiest Heroes, taking place in 2012. Where Nick Fury struggles to launch the Avengers when candidates are targeted by a serial killer, which we later find to be a much darker and eviler version of Hank Pym. A villain I don't think anybody really expected us to ever get. But following up from this, we do have another very popular franchise, the Amazing Spider-Man franchise on Earth 120703, with the first film, The Amazing Spider-Man, taking place in 2012, where Peter Parker uncovers secrets about his parents while gaining spider powers and battling Dr. Kurt Connors, who transforms into the monstrous lizard after a failed experiment. It reboots the Spider-Man origin with a darker tone and emphasis on mystery and science. While self-contained, it lays groundwork for a larger universe and continues into The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014, where Peter faces multiple foes including Electro, Green Goblin, which is Harry Osborn this time, and Rhino, while uncovering Oscorp's sinister secrets and suffering the devastating loss of Gwen Stacy that we first saw in the Today in Marvel history through the TVA, it builds towards a wider universe, including teases of the Sinister Six that we never got to see, but the series was cancelled before continuing. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man does later return in No Way Home that we will explore down the line. And after that, we can go straight to Earth 13122, the Lego Marvel Universe, a definite, interesting to say the least addition to this world, but because of one specific scene in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, it feels like that movie keeps on bringing things into the multiverse, we have to include this world. And it starts with Lego Marvel Superheroes in 2012, where when Loki, Doctor Doom, and other villains unite to capture cosmic bricks from Silver Surfer's board, the Avengers, X-Men, and Spider-Man team up across the Marvel Universe to stop them. It jumpstarts the Lego Marvel Universe, blending characters from across the Marvel world in a humorous, interconnected setting, establishing the tone for all future Lego Marvel adaptations, which goes into Lego Marvel Superheroes Maximum Overload, taking place in 2013, where Loki unleashes the mysterious Overload to supercharge villains like Doc Ock, Venom, and Mandarin, forcing Spider-Man and the Avengers to stop his chaotic plot. Acts as a comedic tie-in to the Lego Marvel Superheroes, and captures the fast-paced, joke-heavy Lego tone, and continues with Lego Marvel Superheroes Avengers Reassembled in 2015, where the Avengers must regroup after Iron Man is mind-controlled by Ultron, who plans to rebuild himself stronger using Stark Tech and take over the world. It centers on core MCU characters, and serves as this world's version of Avengers Age of Ultron. And it's followed up by Lego Marvel Superheroes Guardians of the Galaxy The Thanos Threat, taking place in 2017, where the Guardians discover Thanos is hunting the Buildstone, a Lego-style artifact of immense power, and must stop him before he reshapes reality. Which, in a lot of ways, is this world's version of Guardians of the Galaxy and Infinity War. After this is Lego Marvel Superheroes Black Panther Trouble in Wakanda in 2018, also this world's version of Black Panther, where when Claw and Killmonger attempt to steal vibranium, Black Panther, Shuri, and the Avengers unite to protect Wakanda from destruction. Next is Vexed by Venom in 2019, where Spider-Man teams up with Iron Man and Ghost Spider to stop Venom and Green Goblin from unleashing a symbiote-powered disaster at the Oscorp Halloween Science Expo. It's focused more on the Spider-Verse side of Lego Marvel, while incorporating some MCU-era figures like Iron Man. After this is Lego Marvel Avengers Climate Conundrum in 2020, where the Avengers investigate strange climate disasters around the globe, uncovering that AIM and Red Skull are using stolen Stark Tech to manipulate the weather. After this, we go back to probably our longest run of What If projects without any stoppage, and it starts with Earth 21818, taking place in 2014, What If T'Challa became Star-Lord, where the rough and tumble space pirates, known as the Ravagers from the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, abduct T'Challa from the Black Panther franchise instead of Peter Quill. It's a pretty fun story to watch, and it's followed up by a project in Earth TRN 20151, taking place in 2015 before Age of Ultron, What If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas. This is a pretty strange project because it makes Happy Hogan into the Hulk, and Happy Hogan sets out to prove his hero chops when Justin Hammer lays siege to Avengers Tower during the annual holiday party. Like I mentioned, pretty weird project, and I know that I mentioned it's a long run of What If projects, and even though this next one isn't exactly a What If project, it is in a couple of ways that I'll mention soon. And we have on Earth TRN 1450 in 2016, around the time of Spider-Man Homecoming, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is the recent Disney Plus series, which offers a fresh take on Peter Parker's origin story with a branched timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The plot deviates from the MCU's sacred timeline, creating unique challenges and opportunities for Peter as he navigates his new powers and responsibilities. While it's not exactly a What If spin-off, a couple of things make it sort of a What If episode, but a full series of it. One being that it is not afraid to use the same MCU characters and storylines like we see Iron Man, we see Captain America, Doctor Strange, obviously Spider-Man. Where if this were a what if episode, it could be called What If Spider-Man Met Norman Osborn instead of Tony Stark. That's exactly the premise of this show. And we even see that with the finale showing Uatu the Watcher watching over this universe. And after that, continuing with the What If franchise, we have what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands in 2016, where a grief-stricken Doctor Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto in a dangerous effort to change the past. And we get to meet probably the strongest version of this character we've ever seen in the entire multiverse, with Strange Supreme, that literally just starts absorbing everything and becoming an all-powerful being that can see through the multiverse. And he will have a huge role moving forward with the What If franchise, with where it tries to go. But after this, we have What If Zombies, taking place in 2018 around the time of Thanos arriving on Earth, where when the Avengers are infected by a zombie plague, surviving heroes search for a cure. And outside of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, this is the only episode that really shows Spider-Man having a major role in it in the What If franchise. Wish we got more of them, but they were really trying to hold out for some reason, probably some rights issue with Sony. In Phase 6, we will get a follow-up to this world in a full limited series on Disney Plus that will be rated R. I'm very excited for that. It should be coming out later this year, I believe, if not next year. So definitely look forward to that. And that takes place on Earth 2149. And followed by that, we have the grand finale of Season 1 of What If, with Earth TRN 20181, What If Ultron 1, taking place in 2018. And this sees Natasha Romanoff and Clint Barton seeking to destroy Killer Robot Ultron following a cataclysmic event. This event being Ultron actually took over the body of Vision, and by taking over Vision's body, his plan came to fruition. He was able to destroy the Avengers, and he was actually able to destroy Thanos that arrived on Earth at that exact moment, taking away the Infinity Gauntlet from him, receiving all 6 stones, and becoming Infinity Ultron. Which, I know I just mentioned Doctor Strange being one of the most powerful versions we've seen with Strange Supreme. This version of Ultron is ridiculously powerful. And we see this especially at the end of the episode, where Uatu the Watcher, as he always does, starts talking and narrating over what's happening at that moment. But Infinity Ultron hears him in one of the most shocking moments of this show. Probably the most shocking moment of this show. And it sets us up for a grand finale in What If the Watcher Broke His Oath, where the Watcher gathers heroes from across the multiverse for one final battle against Infinity Ultron. And these heroes from across the multiverse include Natasha Romanoff that we saw in the last episode, Star-Lord T'Challa, Peggy Carter, Captain Carter, or Captain America, or Captain Britain, whatever you want to call her, Party Thor, Strange Supreme, obviously Uatu the Watcher, the Killmonger that helped Tony Stark be rescued but was actually trying to take over Wakanda, and a variant of Gamora we have yet to meet in this world, but we will meet her very soon. And honestly, I think this was a great finale for Season 1. I thought the last 2 episodes killed it, and it got me very excited for Season 2. There were some complications with Season 2. I thought they kind of just tried to repeat the magic with Season 1 instead of trying to make it its own thing. But we're not here to review. We're here to talk about what happens in this world. And we can go right into that with Earth TRN 20121. What if Iron Man crashed into the Grandmaster, taking place in 2012? And this is really the project that introduces us to this variant of Gamora that we saw in the last episode, where Tony Stark challenges the Grandmaster, leading to a Grand Prix turned Demolition Derby deathmatch, all the way on Sakaar. And it's great to see this version of Tony with this amazing Sakaarian suit that he builds. But with that, we continue with Earth TRN 15001. What if Kaori reshaped the world? Taking place in the early 1500s, where a Mohawk woman ventures into the waters of the Forbidden Lake to help save her people. And Kaori is an original character, that I'm actually very interested to see what they do with her in the future in the comics, and if they ever go live action with her, because she has a pretty interesting origin where she gains her powers by being exposed to the cosmic energy of the Space Stone after it falls into the Forbidden Lake in her world. But this is followed up by the second project in Earth 82111 with What If Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper, taking place in 2012 around the same time as The Winter Soldier, being a clear follow-up to the events of Captain Carter from Season 1. And here we see Captain Carter's mission to save Steve Rogers sets her on a collision course with new enemies, as she teams up with Natasha Romanoff, who she last met in the finale of Season 1. After this, we have What If the Avengers Assembled in 1602 on Earth 311, obviously taking place in the year 1602, where Captain Carter tries to undo the anomaly that strands familiar heroes and villains in 1602 that she first saw in What If Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper, but it leads to a much larger problem with the Season 2 finale in What If Strange Supreme Intervened, which takes place right after that 1602 episode, where Strange asks Peggy to help with an adversary, but this demented sorcerer is keeping a secret from his old friend, as Strange Supreme has become obsessed with getting as much power as possible to bring back his world. We saw this before, and he realized he couldn't do it, but now he thinks through the power of the multiverse, maybe he has enough power to bring back his heart that we saw in the first episode with Strange Supreme. It brings Uatu back into the fold, as Strange Supreme is now the villain instead of the strongest protagonist. And of course, who's going to win this? Captain Carter, of course. In the What If franchise, I can talk about Strange Supreme, I can talk about Infinity Ultron, I can talk about all of these characters, but undoubtedly the strongest character in What If is Captain Carter with the plot armor that they give her in this franchise. And with that, we can move on to a world we will actually eventually see pop up in an MCU movie, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I will say this is not a confirmed theory that these properties take place in this world, but for two main reasons I decided to say all of these projects are in this world. Actually, three main reasons. And I will say why after I name all of these projects, and this is in Earth 838. The universe that we see in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which starts with Inhumans in 2017, where after a coup on the moon-led city of Atalan, Black Bolt and the royal family, Medusa, Karnak, Gorgon, and Crystal flee to Earth to stop Maximus, Black Bolt's brother, from usurping their rule. This show introduced the Inhumans as a secret moon-based society and is followed up by Runaway Season 1 in 2017, where a group of teenagers discovers that their parents are part of a villainous cult called Pride, and that they themselves have inherited extraordinary abilities, which is set in Los Angeles and loosely acknowledges the MCU with mentions of Wakanda and the Dark Dimension, but stands on its own. The show introduces magic, alien tech, and hidden societies, all of which do mirror multiversal concepts, and is followed up by Cloak and Dagger Season 1 in 2018, where Cloak and Dagger, two teens with traumatic pasts, gain powers that are linked to the mysterious Roxxon Corporation and a dimensional energy called the Dark Force. Now, we have seen the Roxxon Corporation before in the MCU through both Agent Carter and projects from the Defender Saga, but since this isn't part of the main MCU through this, we can't really mention it here. And their powers are tied to the Dark Force dimension, the same energy source explored in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and briefly seen in Doctor Strange. So we actually could say that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is part of this world, but then it wouldn't be Earth 838. I would rather have it be Earth 838, and then down the line, we'll just say that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is in the rebooted franchise. I think that's going to be a better way to do this. And after that, we have Runaway Season 2 in 2018, where now on the run, the teens must survive independently while fighting off Pride, the alien possession, and betrayal within their own group, which deepens the magical and alien influences, expanding this take on spiritual and cosmic lore, elements echoing the kind of multiversal threats seen with sorcerers and demonic beings in Multiverse of Madness. But first, we have Cloak and Dagger Season 2 in 2019,
where the two main characters take on sex trafficking operations and a villain named Andre Deshane, who tries to use their powers for his own godlike ascension. It's followed up by Runaway Season 3 in 2019, where the team faces Morgan Le Fay, a powerful dark sorceress from the Dark Dimension, who seeks to conquer Earth, and they must master magic, tech, and their bonds to defeat her. This is the strongest link to the Darkhold across this world, where Morgan Le Fay even references ancient dark magic and realms, paralleling Wanda's corruption in Multiverse of Madness we'll eventually see. And we do see pretty much the Darkhold in this show, which makes it very clear to us that this world has its own version of the Darkhold in the past. Obviously, we know that this version of the Darkhold was eventually acquired by Doctor Strange, and we will get to that in Multiverse of Madness. And then the last project that would be in this world would be Hellstrom, but I actually would love to see Hellstrom come back in the future of the MCU in phases 7 through 9 as part of the main timeline, simply because it feels like a very similar premise to what we have with the Conjuring franchise, but more built towards the MCU. I think it would be a great way to just introduce us to a ton of this magic world that we haven't really been able to see. Hellstrom, we're going to keep that for later.
This leads us directly into the multiverse phase that I'll call the Spider-Man phase. With the Spider-Man phase, we start to go into a ton of multiversal projects, whether it be the Spider-Verse franchise, the Venom franchise, the Insomniac Spider-Man franchise, and all of them take place in the MCU's grand multiverse. And we start with Earth 1048, Insomniac Spider-Man, taking place in 2018, where veteran Spider-Man Peter Parker takes on a deadly threat from Doc Ock, whose turn to villainy unleashes a wave of chaos across New York with help from the Sinister Six and the Devil's Breath virus. Peter's experience already mentoring Miles Morales by the end of this story, laying the groundwork for future stories. The game also introduces multiple alternate suits, including those from other universes, foreshadowing multiversal links that will later be explored down the line. But this story is not over with this first Insomniac Spider-Man game, because we later got DLC in the form of Marvel Spider-Man: The City That Never Sleeps, where Peter faces a new crime wave led by Hammerhead and the Magia crime families, all while balancing his relationship with Black Cat in the aftermath of the game's events. It builds on the consequences of the Devil's Breath outbreak while expanding Peter's rogues gallery, and deepens Peter's emotional stakes following up on the loss of Aunt May, and sets the tone for how the city's power vacuum could lead to larger future threats down the line. Now, we will continue this world, but not now, because now we actually jump into Earth 688, which is Venom's universe, but we actually start with the newest project in this world, Kraven the Hunter. When I was putting together the watch order for all of the Venom's universe movies, or the Sony Spider-Man universe, whatever you want to call it, it actually made the most sense to me for Kraven the Hunter to be the first movie in this world, and everything else be a follow-up to it. So we start with Kraven the Hunter, taking place before all these other properties, where Sergei Kravenov, a ruthless animal conservationist turned superpowered hunter, sets out to prove he's the greatest predator alive by targeting those he deems unworthy of power. It acts as an origin story for one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, though no Spider-Man appears, and it helps begin to set the stage for Sony's rogue-centered world, hinting at larger predator/prey themes tied to superhumans, where we see this Kraven the Hunter face off against the Rhino, and a tease of a future battle against the Chameleon, which who knows if we're ever going to get to see. I did try to expand this world with my How to Fix the Sony Spider-Man Universe series. I kind of stopped it once they announced that they were going to stop making movies in this world. I felt like it was kind of pointless at that point. Maybe I eventually go back to it, but for now, we're holding off here. And we'll just continue with talking about the past. And speaking on the past, we have the first Venom movie after this, taking place in 2018, where journalist Eddie Brock becomes bonded with an alien symbiote named Venom, forming an uneasy alliance to stop Carlton Drake and Riot from unleashing symbiotes globally. It introduces this world with a street-level anti-hero narrative. It is separate from the main MCU, but it ends with Venom's protector persona taking hold. And same as what happened with Insomniac Spider-Man, We do have more in this world, but we'll hold off for now because the next project to come out around this time is actually an Earth 8311 Spider-Ham Caught in a Ham. So this is actually a short film that takes place right before Into the Spider-Verse, focusing in on Spider-Ham, where in the animated short, Spider-Ham, also known as Peter Porker, is captured by the villain Dr. Crawdaddy. After a series of comical encounters and Spider-Ham's witty commentary on the villain's name, Spider-Ham escapes and is then pulled into a portal, transporting him into another dimension, which sets this up perfectly for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, taking place on Earth 1610 in 2018, where Miles Morales has just started at a new school and is struggling to fit in. He's then bitten by radioactive spider and obtains certain powers similar to those of Spider-Man. He doesn't know what to do with those powers or how to control them, so naturally he turns to Spider-Man for advice. Eventually, that world's Spider-Man faces off against this world's version of the Sinister Six, passes, but because of the leader of the Sinister Six, Kingpin, we have the multiverse that arises with the Spider-Verse, with multiple Spider-Men and Spider-Women coming from the multiverse to this main world. One of which is Spider-Ham, and another of which is Peter B. Parker, which has some very similar moments to what happened to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, showing that there are connection points throughout the multiverse for these stories. A theme that we will eventually get into with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But for now, we can continue into the world of What If with Earth TRN 20191. What If Nebula joined the Nova Corps, taking place in 2018, around 5 years after Guardians of the Galaxy, where Nebula sets out to prove her detective chops when she's recruited to join the Nova Corps. And this actually allows us to jump back into the world of Earth 1048 with Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales in 2019, the video game, which brings us back into the world of Insomniac and is a direct follow-up to Marvel Spider-Man, where we do see Miles Morales get his abilities, and while Peter's away, Miles takes up the mantle of Spider-Man to protect Harlem, facing off against the Tinkerer, his childhood friend Finn, and the Energy Corporation Roxxon, where it's very evident at this point Roxxon has a large role to play in multiple worlds in the multiverse, in the MCU, in Earth 838, and here in the Insomniac world. And it fully develops Miles as a second playable Spider-Man with unique powers like camouflage and bioelectricity, realigning Miles with his role as a central figure in what we just mentioned with the Spider-Verse. And this is the second version of Miles Morales we've really seen in the multiverse up until this point. But we will see a third, just not there yet. Across the Spider-Verse goes into it at the end, but I cannot wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse to go further into that. And now this allows us to continue back into the main MCU run with Earth 616 with WandaVision, taking place in 2023, 3 weeks post-Avengers Endgame, where Wanda creates a false reality in Westview to live an idyllic life with Vision. But the illusion begins to unravel as Agatha Harkness reveals herself and manipulates events. The show ends with Wanda embracing her identity as the Scarlet Witch and beginning to study the Darkhold, setting up Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which we'll eventually see, by establishing Wanda as a major magical force, and connects to broader multiverse threats down the line that we will see. Not to mention, introducing Agatha Harkness, a character that we first saw in What If, and a character that we will definitely see again down the line with her own show. We're not there yet, we'll get there eventually. But this is followed up by Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings in summer of 2023, where Shang-Chi confronts his father Wenwu and the legacy of the Ten Rings, Wenwu being the real Mandarin, where Shang-Chi ultimately inherits the rings after defeating the Dweller in Darkness threatening Ta Lo. The film connects to the wider MCU through a mid-credit scene where Wong, Bruce Banner, and Captain Marvel examine the Ten Rings' mysterious origin, hinting at cosmic or multiversal implications, something that we were gonna see down the line. Who knows if we still are, if it's still part of the plans. Initially, they were probably gonna make it that Kang created this in some reality, but now that they're doing Doctor Doom instead of Kang, who knows what's going on with this. I feel like this post-credit scene might just be eliminated and they might just rework it. But nonetheless,
Us seeing Wong does help, again, tease Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and actually She-Hulk, because we also see Abomination, a character we hadn't seen since The Incredible Hulk in this movie. And this is followed up by The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which takes place 6 months after Avengers Endgame. Sam Wilson grapples with becoming Captain America while facing the rise of anti-nationalist rebels and a corrupted super soldier program in this TV series. He ultimately accepts the mantle and redefines what Captain America stands for. The series builds the future of the Avengers by officially naming Sam as the new Captain America and introducing Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, setting up future projects like Thunderbolts, and this is actually the perfect point to watch that post-credit scene of Black Widow that I said long ago to not watch because it would have been a spoiler. This is when you watch it because it works to give a tease of the future of Yelena Belova as well, connected with the characters from The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but also connecting her with the future of the MCU. And after this, we jump out of the main timeline and go to Earth 13122, which was the LEGO universe with LEGO Marvel Avengers Loki in training, taking place in that world's 2021, where Loki himself is reluctantly placed under the supervision of the Avengers to teach him how to be a hero. But his chaotic nature leads to humorous disasters and hijinks that test the patience of LEGO Earth's mightiest heroes. And after this, we can go back to the world of What If with Earth 21443, What If the Hulk fought the Mech Avengers, which takes place 10 years after the Winter Soldier, so in 2024, where massive monsters emerge after a gamma incident threatening humanity. As the Avengers struggle, new heroes rise to battle the creatures using advanced mech suits. Sam Wilson forms an unexpected bond with Bruce Banner amid the chaos. And this is really a fun story in this world. I feel like season 3 of What If actually got its foot running pretty well with some of these projects. And the project that I was actually the most proud of watching was the next one in the next universe, in Earth X. What if the Emergence destroyed the Earth, which takes place in a near dystopian future. Now, if DC and Marvel ever do have some sort of crossover, this might be a problem, this being on Earth X, because Earth X is a common Earth number from the DC universe as well. But for now, we can ignore that. We can just focus on this being Earth X, where in a fractured world, Riri Williams leads rebels against the oppressive Quentin Beck and his Iron Legion. Armed with illusion powers, Beck seems unstoppable, and Riri's failures are mirrored in other realities observed by the Watcher. And Riri Williams is the character that will eventually take over the mantle of Iron Man in the form of Ironheart in the main MCU as well. We'll get there eventually. That is actually the last project to come out from Phase 5. So it should be the final project of this world, not chronologically, but it's the reason I waited to make this video. And she's facing off against Quentin Beck, that many of you know as Mysterio. And with the Watcher deciding to change Riri's fate in this episode, it results in the Watcher actually getting kidnapped by the other Watchers, which is a very fun story to tell. And this is actually followed directly by What If 1872, taking place on Earth 31913, obviously in the year 1872, where in an alternate 1872, Shang-Chi and Kate Bishop, who will eventually become the apprentice of Hawkeye, roam the Wild West, battling foes and searching for the nefarious Hood. They seek his ghost train and hope to find Shang-Chi's missing sister, along with other vanished Chinese immigrants. And this is really just a lead up to the final 2 episodes of the What If series, where the protagonists try to save the Watcher, which takes us directly out of Earth 31913 and into, not a specific Earth, but into the 5th dimension, with What If the Watcher disappeared, where a skilled leader forms an elite squad to combat interdimensional threats. When her ally vanishes, they embark on a quest to locate him, seeking a powerful entity capable of transporting them to his otherworldly prison. And who are these characters I'm speaking of? Well, we get to meet Storm from the X-Men, which is really the first time, apart from X-Men 97, that we see her in any capacity in Disney's Marvel. We're reintroduced to Birdie, the child of Howard the Duck, and Darcy Lewis, and they're led by Captain Carter, who many people hate from this show, but they find another version of Infinity Ultron that they use to help them find the Watcher. And then the grand finale of this series is What If, where pursued across realities, Captain Carter and her team aid the Watcher in evading capture. They seek refuge in the multiverse's hidden corners in a fight for survival as other Watchers close in, intent on their total annihilation. And by the end of this story, this main team of Captain Carter, Kaori, Storm, Birdie, and Uatu the Watcher all become the new Watchers. Well, Captain Carter, not really. Spoiler, but she does die at the end of this. So for those of you that didn't like the character, I guess you can say thank you to that final episode. And this episode ends with a very impactful line for the future of the multiverse, which is when Uatu the Watcher proclaims, "This is the end of the beginning," teasing that we have not even seen anything from the multiverse yet. We still have multiple projects. We still have No Way Home, Multiverse of Madness, Beyond the Spider-Verse, and of course, what we will eventually get with Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars.
And with the end of the beginning comes the beginning of the end. And the beginning of the end starts with something I didn't think I was going to mention this video until I saw this movie, The Fantastic Four First Steps. No spoilers here. I will not say any spoilers for this movie. And this takes place on Earth 828 in the 1960s. And before that movie, we have the YouTube series Meet the Fantastic Four, recently released by Disney, that gives introductions to each of the Fantastic Four from this version of the Marvel multiverse. And leading into that, we have the Fantastic Four First Steps taking place in 1963, which takes place around the same time as the main MCU's 2024. That's all I'm going to give for information. Highly recommend you guys watch this movie. I actually really enjoyed it. Have a few little issues, but honestly, for the most part, great movie. Highly recommend. And from that, we can move back to the main MCU timeline with Earth 616 and Spider-Man Far From Home, taking place in 2024, 8 months after Avengers Endgame, where Peter Parker struggles with the loss of Tony Stark and attempts to live a normal life on a school trip to Europe, but he's manipulated by Mysterio, a character we first saw in What If, a vengeful ex-Stark employee posing as a multiversal hero. The film closes the Infinity Saga in its shocking post-credits scene where Peter's identity is revealed to the world, leading directly into Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, it is the film that officially closes the Infinity Saga, but let's be honest, nobody really considers it as that ending. Everybody considers Avengers Endgame as the ending. And while this does directly lead into Spider-Man No Way Home, there is another project that takes place during Spider-Man Far From Home, which is back on Earth 688, Venom Let There Be Carnage in 2019, where as Eddie and the symbiote adjust to cohabitating, they face Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer who merges with the symbiote Carnage and seeks violent revenge. It's set during Far From Home, and the post-credit scene shows Eddie being mysteriously transported to the MCU. Why? We don't know yet, but we will find out in the next project, Spider-Man No Way Home, where Spider-Man No Way Home takes place right after Far From Home, following up on the events of Spider-Man's identity being revealed to the public. It starts at that time, but then there's a little bit of a time jump a few months later until it gets to the winter time, where Peter asks Doctor Strange to erase knowledge of his identity, and a botched spell unleashes villains and Spider-Man from across the multiverse, leading to tragic consequences and heroic unity. This major multiversal crossover culminates with Peter sacrificing his connections to protect the world. It officially brings back characters from the Raimi and Webb universes into the MCU, while briefly hosting Earth 688's Eddie Brock during the post-credit scene, which I'll get into. But first, this is the first real big movie that went into the multiverse in the main MCU, where we get to see Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man team up with Tom Holland Spider-Man. Seeing all three of them on screen together was an event in and of itself, and seeing all the villains come from all of these other movies, like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Jamie Foxx's Electro, and so many more like Sandman, Doc Ock, the Lizard, and then to be able to see Venom and that tease at the end of the movie, showing that Venom is going to be the next story with Spider-Man, that was a great way to close this story. I absolutely love this movie. And this leads directly into what I just mentioned, Venom: The Last Dance back on Earth 688, which takes place around 1 year after Venom and right after No Way Home. And sadly, it kind of undoes what we just found out in Spider-Man No Way Home, where following his return from Earth 616, Eddie must face new threats as he and Venom become fugitives. The government wants the alien symbiote, and Eddie is forced into one final conflict to protect their bond. The film picks up immediately after No Way Home, where Eddie leaves behind a piece of the symbiote in the MCU, seeding future chaos on Earth 616, but there was one scene where that symbiote was captured, so who knows anymore if that still took place on Earth 616, if they're even still planning on doing Venom. Many people thought that they were going to do Spider-Man King in Black as Spider-Man 4 based on what they teased at the end of this movie, with the major threat being Null, the King of Symbiotes. But now it looks like it's going to be a grounded story, so that's a lot better. And guess what? Who thought that it was going to be a grounded story? Yours truly. To be fair, I also thought that it was going to be Spider-Man King in Black, but we don't talk about that. If you want to watch my take on what this second Spider-Man trilogy should be, highly recommend watching this video. I'm very proud of what I was able to do on this one. And after Venom: The Last Dance, we do have Morbius in 2019, taking place between Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and obviously after Venom: The Last Dance, where in an attempt to cure his rare blood disease, Dr. Morbius inadvertently becomes a living vampire. He grapples with his monstrous urges while trying to stop his surrogate brother Milo, who embraces the power. Though disconnected from major events, the film's post-credit scenes bizarrely feature Vulture from Earth 616 arriving in Earth 688, hinting at further cross-universe interference possibly caused by No Way Home. But I don't believe so. Rather, I believe that this was caused by the anomalies seen in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse that we will get to very soon. And we do see Morbius do his best Venom impression, and I genuinely believe this one takes place after all the Venom movies because of the way that people react to Venom in this world, sort of like he's a thing of the past in a way. And this would be a very easy way for them to say, oh, Venom no longer exists in this world. Now Morbius is the new hero. We don't need to create a team like we were initially going to do. And after this, we actually jump back into the LEGO world with Earth 13122 with LEGO Marvel Avengers Time Twisted in 2022, where the Avengers are scattered across time when Kang the Conqueror launches a chaotic time heist, distorting key moments in history. The team must reassemble through different eras to stop Kang from rewriting the timeline in his image, and in many ways, this kind of feels like the unofficial Avengers Kang Dynasty that we never got. And this is a version of Kang that I guess maybe was the last one. Maybe he was part of the Council of Kangs, maybe he wasn't. But who knows what's going to happen with the Council of Kangs in Avengers Doomsday, if they're still going to bring them back. Who knows what's going on at this point. And this takes us right back into the main MCU timeline. And we start this longest run with none other than Eternals, taking place in 2024, around 8 months after Avengers Endgame, where the Eternals, immortal beings created by the Celestials, reunite after centuries to stop the Deviants and prevent the emergence of a new Celestial. Icarus's betrayal leads to a dramatic clash over humanity's fate, and it introduces the cosmic scale of the MCU, with Celestials laying groundwork for Blade, Black Knight, and the larger multiversal threat down the line. Not to mention, the main Celestial scene in this movie that was supposed to emerge from the Earth's core is frozen in the Earth's core, and we will later find out exactly what this means for the future, but we cannot speak on that yet because we have to go on to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, taking place in 2024 after No Way Home, where Doctor Strange teams up with America Chavez to stop Wanda, corrupted by the Darkhold, from destroying the multiverse in search of her lost children.
It expands the multiverse, introducing Loki in No Way Home, and introduces incursions, which is when a character from one universe stays in another universe for too long, which leads into a theory that I have of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse that I can get into later. And this movie takes us through the multiverse, and the main universe that we get to see is Earth 838, a universe that we previously explored with a lot of the non-Netflix, Disney, Marvel TV shows. And we get to see a member of that world with Black Bolt from the Inhumans, alongside other members of the Illuminati of this world, which are the former Doctor Strange, a new version of Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, a new version of Captain Marvel, which is godmother of Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel, and Morta, who takes the place of the fallen Doctor Strange from this universe. This is followed up by Hawkeye, taking place in Christmas 2024 after the No Way Home epilogue, where Clint trains Kate while uncovering a conspiracy tied to the criminal underworld and his past as Ronin, which eventually leads us to finding out that Kate's mother has been working with Kingpin all along, officially connecting Kingpin into the main MCU timeline. And I did forget to mention in Spider-Man No Way Home, apart from all those characters that we saw from all these other Spider-Man franchises, we do get to see Daredevil for the first time in the main MCU. So that was a great scene, a shocker for a lot of people. I love that scene. But this is followed up by Moon Knight in 2025, taking place after Hawkeye, where a man with dissociative identity disorder becomes the avatar of Khonshu, battling Hera, who seeks to unleash the goddess Ammit. It's very self-contained in this world, but introduces Egyptian mythology and expands the MCU's supernatural corner, and I really have no idea where they're going to tie this story in. I wouldn't be surprised if they just keep this until after the Multiverse Saga, and they just say that it took place in the Mutant Saga. Who knows what they want to do, but for now, we're going to keep it here. And after this, we have Black Panther Wakanda Forever in 2025, where following T'Challa's death, Shuri becomes the new Black Panther and faces Namor, the king of Talokan, in a battle between advanced civilizations. Introduces Namor and Talokan, setting up Ironheart eventually, and shifting the Wakandan narrative toward global politics, and really changing the scope of what Wakanda means to the world and what vibranium means to the world. But after this, we do have a follow-up to Hawkeye, which is Echo, taking place in 2025, where Maya returns to her roots to confront her past and Kingpin's hold on her, seeking redemption and closure. It bridges Hawkeye and the eventual Daredevil Born Again, confirming Kingpin's power and influence post-Thanos' snap, where we actually also get to see Echo face off against Daredevil for the first time. And speaking on Daredevil, we have probably the worst project that Daredevil was part of, She-Hulk Attorney at Law, taking place in summer 2025. I wish I could ignore this project, but it has too many ties to the rest of the MCU to not. So Jennifer gains Hulk powers after a blood accident and navigates life as a lawyer and superhero, including cases involving Wong and Daredevil, reintroducing Matt Murdock, playing with meta commentary on MCU structure, and deepening the Hulk family story. And I see deepening the Hulk family story because not only do we see Hulk in this, but we also see the Abomination that is actually released from prison, and this is his big break in the MCU, even though there were projects we could have had him in where he had a much better big break. Once again, seeing the smart Hulk that I really don't like the way that they did him. And back on that, they also made Abomination Smart Abomination, where for some reason he was able to solve it without going back in the meta tank like Bruce Banner. So this show makes no sense. And then also meeting Scar, the son of Hulk, that honestly, we didn't see him for long enough. No real complaints except for what everybody says. That haircut makes no sense. And then, of course, She-Hulk. I don't even know where to get started with her. But this is a show that definitely breaks the fourth wall in a similar way to Deadpool, but in a much less entertaining way. And honestly, I just really wasn't a fan of the show. Let's just move on. After this, we have Miss Marvel taking place in 2025, where Kamala discovers her powers and heritage, balancing family, school, and heroism. And her final scene ties into the Marvels after a key reveal hints at mutants entering the MCU, where we already met the first mutant in the MCU, which was none other than Namor in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But as we continue seeing through Ms. Marvel, we eventually find out not only is Ms. Marvel an Inhuman, but she also has the mutant gene that has just been discovered in this world. And then, like I mentioned before, it ties into the Marvels, but we'll get into that later. After this, we have Thor: Love and Thunder. And let me just say, looking back at these last few projects right now, where we had Echo, She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, Thor: Love and Thunder, this is definitely one of the runs of all time. So in this story, Thor must stop Gore from killing all gods while grappling with Jane's return and terminal illness. It continues Thor's evolution post-Endgame and introduces Eternity and Love, Gore's daughter, nudging the cosmic realm further, as we also get to see the continued story of the Guardians of the Galaxy, where Thor is a member of the Guardians to the start of this film. And we also get to meet some other gods in the story. Obviously, we had Moon Knight, where we were able to meet the Egyptian gods, but here we're able to meet the Greek gods, where we meet Hercules and Zeus. After this, we have Ironheart, taking place in 2025, and even though it is the last project of Phase 5, it is not chronologically. So, here Riri builds her own Iron Man-style suit while confronting magic-infused tech threats and her role in a post-Stark world. It spins off of Wakanda Forever and continues themes of science versus mysticism, setting up future Young Avengers projects, but I actually think it helps us set up even more the future Midnight Suns project that we'll eventually get. I feel like Riri Williams will be part of the Midnight Suns before she's part of the Young Avengers, simply because of how this show ended. Since this show came out pretty recently, I'm not going to spoil that ending. All I'm going to say is we finally get to see Mephisto in this show. What he does with Riri, I can neither confirm nor deny. That's up to you to watch. But keeping on that horror track, we have Werewolf by Night in 2025, where this character known as Jack reveals his monstrous side to protect fellow creature Man-Thing from the ruthless hunters. It establishes Marvel's supernatural horror tone and connects loosely to Blade and the Midnight Suns potential storyline that we'll see, in my opinion, towards the start of the Mutant Saga. After this, we have another special presentation with the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special taking place in 2026, where the Guardians celebrate Earth's Christmas and try to cheer up Peter by bringing him Kevin Bacon, lightening the tone before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and revealing Mantis is actually Peter's half-sister, meaning that Ego, the living planet, is also the father of Mantis. After this, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in 2026, evidently taking place after Loki, but also after all these projects, where Scott, Hope, Cassie, and family are pulled into the quantum realm and must escape while confronting Kang. It kicks off the Kang Dynasty arc, building on Loki and multiverse tension with major consequences for the timeline. Now, we never really get to see where this finally goes. We just know we meet Kang the Conqueror in the story, and Ant-Man defeats Kang the Conqueror. So if that's how they want to close out the Kang Dynasty arc, where this all-powerful being was just killed by giant ants, they can do that. They already moved on to Avengers Doomsday. I wouldn't be surprised if they just completely ignore this and they just keep on moving forward from here. But followed by that, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, taking place in 2026 after the holiday special, and this being James Gunn's last project in the MCU, right before he takes on the DCU and starts up that new world. And not to mention, James Gunn has actually mentioned that because now he's in charge of DC, there's a better chance of an MCU-DCU crossover. We'll see if that eventually happens. But for now, we'll just talk about this with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where the Guardians face Rocket's traumatic origins and the Mad High Evolutionary, threatening the galaxy with twisted genetic experiments. It ends the Guardians saga with Rocket taking leadership and setting new cosmic players into motion for future phases.
Not to mention this story really being the breakup or the finale for the Guardians of the Galaxy, where we see Peter Quill go back to Earth and go back to his family.
And now we continue back in the Spider-Verse universe, otherwise known as the Ultimate Universe, with Earth 1610 with The Spider Within, which is a short film made in the same world following Miles Morales, where Miles struggles to balance his life as a student and Spider-Man, eventually confronting a psychological creature that symbolizes his stress and fear that he made with his own mind. It's set shortly after Into the Spider-Verse and explores Miles' mental health and inner growth, offering insight into his emotional maturity just before Across the Spider-Verse occurs. And speaking of Across the Spider-Verse, here we have it. This film, over a year after the first, shows Miles being pulled into a larger multiverse by Gwen and meeting the Spider Society, which includes multiple of the Spider-Men that we've established throughout the entire run of the MCU full watch order so far. There are a lot of interesting characters in this full watch order that all come to fruition in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, setting them as part of this larger multiverse. In this, he clashes with Spider-Man 2099, otherwise known as Miguel, who believes Miles is a multiversal anomaly that must be controlled to prevent a catastrophe. Meanwhile, the Spot becomes a growing threat. It continues the multiverse exploration begun in Into the Spider-Verse, linking the Earth 616 via MCU's Spider-Man's impact in No Way Home, where he calls out that Spider-Man saying Doctor Strange and that little nerd on Earth 1999999. Now, this is one thing that nobody understands, if the main MCU is Earth 199999 or if it's Earth 616. We really don't fully know. Kevin Feige says 616. Everything else says 19999. So I'm just going to call it 616. It's easier to do. And this film ends with a cliffhanger setting up Beyond the Spider-Verse, which we will get as part of Phase 6 or maybe after. Who knows when we're going to get it. But it is part of this main timeline, and Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to be that grand culmination of everything from the Spider-Verse franchise, where hopefully we also get Tom Holland in that movie. And with that, we can go back to the MCU with the Project Secret Invasion. Now, very similar to Werewolf by Night and Moon Knight, this is a project that I could definitely see them saying actually didn't take place during the Multiverse Saga and instead takes place during the next saga. Or if they want to completely erase this story from history, they could just say when they reboot after Secret Wars, this project never even happened. I would not be surprised if they do that, or if they do the other solution, if they have a follow-up plan for it. But here, Nick Fury returns to Earth to stop a covert Skrull infiltration of global governments led by Gravik, who seeks to replace humanity with enhanced Skrulls. The series sets up global distrust-empowered individuals and alters political dynamics. Not to mention, we meet some Skrull characters that we didn't even know were Skrulls. We find out that War Machine has been a Skrull for the entirety of the Multiverse Saga, all the way back from Captain America Civil War. But after that, we go into the world of Insomniac Spider-Man, which is Earth 1048 with Marvel Spider-Man 2, taking place in 2020, 9 to 10 months after Spider-Man Miles Morales. Where in this story, Peter and Miles team up to battle a brutal surge in supervillains brought on by Kraven's Hunt. While Peter struggles against the influence of a mysterious black suit that enhances his aggression, meanwhile, Harry Osborn becomes Venom after a failed cure for his terminal illness emerges him with the symbiote. This game deepens the personal stakes for both Spider-Man and expands the lore of Oscorp, the symbiote mythos, and upcoming threats like the Green Goblin and Carnage. Its emotional climax sees Peter reject the symbiote while Miles rises further as New York City's protector. Now, the biggest thing about this is going to be Venom from the multiverse perspective, because we know Venom has a hive mind throughout the multiverse. So this Venom that we see in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is connected in some way to Tobey Maguire's Venom and connected to the Venom we saw in the Venom franchise. And then the other thing is there is a side quest in this game that takes you on a journey which eventually culminates with meeting a character from Across the Spider-Verse. We know that the main Insomniac Peter Parker Spider-Man knows about this multiverse, and in that period where he said that he is going on a vacation in the Spider-Man Miles Morales game, I genuinely believe he was actually helping out Spider-Man 2099 with his world of Spider-Man, because that was a very suspicious vacation that he took that really nobody knew exactly what was going on there. And after that, we can hop into the LEGO universe, Earth 13122, with LEGO Marvel Avengers Code Red. I did not realize how many LEGO projects are in this world, but in this story, when a top secret S.H.I.E.L.D. project is stolen, Black Widow is forced to team up with her former ally Red Guardian. Then back in the main MCU, we have the Marvels taking place in 2026, which is a direct follow-up of Secret Invasion, as it shows Nick Fury, but for some reason he looks a lot better in this project, so I have no idea what happened. Another reason why Secret Invasion doesn't make sense with the Marvels and the rest of the MCU. So in this, the three heroines of Carol Danvers, Kamala Khan, and Monica Rambeau, following the events of Ms. Marvel, find their powers entangled, forcing them to team up across space to stop Dar-Ben, a Kree villain using a quantum band to rip open jump points. It connects to Ms. Marvel, WandaVision, and Secret Invasion with multiversal implications, teased in the post-credit scene as Monica ends up in an alternate universe, and she meets a version of X-Men's Beast from the multiverse. Which version is this? I believe it might be Earth 838's versions. This takes us to the true end of the Fox X-Men watch order, with the recently released Deadpool and Wolverine. In this film, we'll see Deadpool go to the TVA, originally introduced to us in Loki, and find out the truth of what the death of Logan means to his world, as he was this world's anchor being, which, as was described in the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, means the world begins to slowly die when its anchor being has died. Now, for the anchor being storyline, apparently what Marvel was initially planning to do for Avengers Kang Dynasty, which has now been scrapped and it's been replaced by Avengers Doomsday, with, as I mentioned before, Doctor Doom being played by Robert Downey Jr. The original plan was a ton of the anchor beings from different worlds were going to unite together to take on the army of Kangs, or the Council of Kangs. And among those were going to be Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, Hugh Jackman Wolverine, and then the MCU's anchor being was apparently going to be Tom Holland Spider-Man, which I wasn't the biggest fan of that idea. But it would have been really cool to have seen all those characters face off against the Kangs together. Sadly, we won't get that, but who knows what they end up doing with Avengers Doomsday. But with that, with Deadpool finding out that the anchor being for his world died and it is going to result in the death of his world, he goes on a journey to find the new Wolverine from the multiverse to become his world's new anchor being. The only problem with the premise of this film is that the story takes place, as it says on screen, 6 years after Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 took place in 2018, which means this movie takes place in the year 2024. But with Logan taking place in 2029, how does this make any sense at all? Well, we have to recognize that time works differently in the TVA. That's a huge factor that they had mentioned to us within the series Loki. And we also have to recognize that Deadpool breaking the fourth wall is what gives him the knowledge of what happened to Wolverine, which is why even in Deadpool 2 taking place in 2018, Deadpool knows it happened, as seen when he brings out the Logan toy. The way that Deadpool's fourth wall breaking works is he knows everything that we know. If we don't know something, he doesn't know it either. He can't tell us what's going to happen in the next movie that hasn't come out, but even if his movie takes place a couple years before Logan, he still knows exactly what happened to Logan. So that's how Deadpool makes sense here. Now, after this, we go back to the main MCU timeline with Agatha All Along, taking place in 2026, about 3 years after WandaVision, where Agatha, stripped of her magic at the end of WandaVision, must regain her powers and confront new mystical threats in Salem as she reawakens ancient witchcraft. It continues the magical lore of the MCU, including the Darkhold's aftermath, and setting up mystical players for future multiversal events or Midnight Suns related projects, like a character we mentioned before, Mephisto, alongside also setting up the children of Wanda and Vision to eventually join the Young Avengers. And a follow-up show called Vision Quest, which we do expect to be getting in Phase 6. And after this, the last project in the multiverse up until now, back to the LEGO world with Earth 13122 LEGO Marvel Avengers Mission Demolition, taking place in 2024.
Give yourself 28 days and become the most dangerous person in the room. Let's be real. Most people over 40
Now we can actually close out with 3 consecutive projects from the main MCU timeline. And we start this with Daredevil Born Again in 2026, where after reappearing in She-Hulk and Echo, Matt returns to Hell's Kitchen to face off against Kingpin, now with political aspirations and a tighter grip on New York's criminal underworld. It continues threads from Echo and Hawkeye alongside Season 3 of Netflix's Daredevil, officially reintegrating that character into the Earth 616 MCU canon while leading toward the street-level resurgence. Also giving us the death of one of the most beloved characters we've seen in the entirety of the MCU and in Netflix in a long time. And if you haven't seen this season, because I feel like not everybody watched it, I highly recommend you do, because Daredevil Born Again Season 5 or Season 2 is going to be basically Daredevil Season 5, which is going to go back to the roots of the first 3 seasons. But I will also say, having Kingpin and Bullseye back in this season was incredible to see. And after this, we have Captain America Brave New World in 2027. We know it's set after Secret Invasion with a new president in charge, not the president from Secret Invasion, but this new one, which is none other than General Ross, where Sam steps into his new role as Captain America, navigating global tensions and a new political threat. It ties into the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Incredible Hulk, with rising government mistrust and superhuman conflict paving the way for the new Avengers, which we'll get to next. But this is also a huge tie-in movie for the Incredible Hulk, where the leader is the main villain, and we see the Red Hulk finally arrive in the MCU. And we return to the raft that we first saw in Captain America Civil War. We have Bucky's team with the Thunderbolts, otherwise known as the New Avengers, set after Brave New World, where DeFontaine's plans finally come to fruition, where she is going to get a new power, the new Earth's mightiest hero. Where this film revolves around the team of anti-heroes Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, Red Guardian, Ghost, US Agent, and Taskmaster for 2 seconds, which are brought together by Valentina Allegra de Fontaine for covert missions. The film sees them initially pitted against each other, leading to unexpected deaths and betrayals, before ultimately uniting to confront a larger threat, related to Valentina's shady dealings and a mysterious individual named Bob, who's connected to the Sentry Project, and will eventually show the world his void. The movie ties into other stories like Captain America Brave New World, where by the end of the movie, this team of Thunderbolts is called the New Avengers. Something that leads to a post-credit scene where we see Sam Wilson is not happy with that trademark, wants to create his own version of the Avengers, which will probably include characters like Captain Marvel and Shang-Chi. But we also see the Fantastic Four ship arrive at the end of this movie in the main MCU timeline from Earth 828 all the way to Earth 616. How? We have to find out in Phase 6 when Avengers Doomsday comes out. And for now, this is the entire run of the MCU so far. This is everything from Phase 1 through Phase 5, except for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but this is the entire universe. And here we are. We have the first 5 phases of the MCU throughout the entire multiverse, every character from the Spider-Verse, every character from the multiverse, every character from the Deadpool-verse, whatever you want to call it. This is it. So, thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on Fantastic Four First Steps, Avengers Doomsday, your excitement level for anything else down the line. And I do want to let you all know I am going to start posting shorts on every multiversal version of individual characters. I'm going to try to post 1 per week up until the release of Avengers Doomsday, so that we have a full watch list of videos. I know this video is ridiculously long, and you can basically just watch another movie instead of watching this, but hey, what 2-hour movie is going to recap you on the entirety of 5 phases of the MCU? So thank you again for watching, and see you all next time on Big Flick Energy.